The man just casually glanced at the class bully and got punched right in the face. Then he was brutally slammed against the desk, but he showed no intention of fighting back. You might think he's a pushover who lets people walk all over him, but it's actually quite the opposite. 2 years ago, he single-handedly took down Nexus, a nationwide high school gang organization, all because Nexus's leader bullied his brother and broke his brother Dong-hyun Kim's leg. Hanjun Park didn't hesitate to seek revenge for his brother Dong-hyun Kim. Having practiced martial arts since childhood, he basically took down each opponent with one punch when facing the group attack. After a bloody battle lasting 2.5 hours, he defeated all the Nexus members. Just when he thought he had secured victory in that great battle, the Nexus gang took him to court and secretly bribed the judge. Facing Nexus with their powerful background, Hanjun Park undoubtedly lost the case. In the end, to pay the enormous compensation, his father was forced to sell the martial arts gym that was his life's work. But the Nexus gang still wasn't satisfied. They secretly tampered with his father's car, nearly killing his father. Hanjun Park realized his family background couldn't compete with Nexus, and while he wasn't afraid to die, he didn't want to harm his father. So he swore in front of his father that he would never fight anyone again. From then on, he truly never fought anyone. Some small-time thugs saw this and began bullying him relentlessly, but he never fought back. Even when getting beaten, his eyes remained sharp, showing no sign of weakness. This day, he was walking home alone as usual. A few punks passed by him on the road. "Look, isn't that Hanjun Park, the undefeated war god who single-handedly took down Nexus? But I heard after that great battle he became a weakling." One of them, a bald man, immediately took off his coat upon hearing this, and dragged Hanjun Park into an alley to beat him up. Turns out they were also Nexus members, and Nexus had grown much larger, recruiting many new people. After beating him for 2 hours, they finally left. At that moment, a man's appearance caught everyone's attention. The man crouched down and asked, "You won't fight back even after being beaten like this? This isn't like the old you. If you don't have money for compensation or lawsuits, I can give it to you, however much you need. How long would it take you to deal with these small fries, 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Seeing this person's attire didn't look like he was joking, Hanjun Park asked, "Who are you?" The man's lips curved slightly. "Someone who wants to help you get revenge and crush Nexus together." Hearing this, Hanjun Park slowly stood up. Dealing with them would take 5 seconds, more than enough. With a thud, an elbow struck the bald man's face directly. The powerful impact made his face cave in, teeth flying out. The bald man collapsed unconscious. The other 2 punks were already scared to death. Hanjun Park didn't give them a chance to speak. He went straight at them with left and right hooks, taking both down. Exactly 5 seconds to take down all 3. The man couldn't help but praise, "Seems like your skills haven't weakened in these 2 years. Then he brought Hanjun Park to his company and revealed his identity. Turns out he was the chairman of OJ Group, the youngest listed company CEO in the country, Jun-ho-oh. Jun-ho-oh's face darkened as he said, "Clearly you're the victim. Yet the perpetrators are thriving more than ever, still secretly gathering people to do evil. And you and your family have been ruined. This taste must be bitter." Hearing these words, Hanjun Park fell into contemplation. Jun-ho-oh continued, "As long as you team up with me, I'll cover all costs to bring down Nexus. And your father's martial arts gym is on me too." Looking at Hanjun Park's determined eyes, he already knew their partnership was sealed. So now, the revenge officially begins. The first person Hanjun Park had to deal with was the class bully. Mogul Choi, backed by Nexus, acted recklessly in class, forcing classmates to help him sell clothes online, using them as cheap labor to exploit. Hanjun Park was constantly targeted because he refused to help sell things. So that's how the opening scene happened. Hanjun Park getting beaten every few days during that period. This day, Hanjun Park suddenly pulled open the door. Mogul Choi was still smoking while insulting the class. "You worthless pieces of trash, didn't finish selling the stuff, you're all screwed today." Then he noticed Hanjun Park had come up behind him. Not yet realizing the severity of the situation, he started cursing. "What are you doing standing there like an idiot? Hurry up!" And before he could finish, a fist the size of a sandbag smashed into his face. This action shocked everyone present, as they'd never seen Hanjun Park act so tough. The intense pain made him realize the man who single-handedly took down Nexus was back. Knowing he was no match for Hanjun Park now, he quickly called for help from his companion. But Hanjun Park just used a single look to scare him into not daring to make eye contact. Seeing this, Mogul Choi could only curse and pull out his phone to threaten, "If you keep hitting me, can you afford the compensation? Don't drag your father down again." Bang! Another heavy punch. This trick no longer worked on Hanjun Park. Mogul Choi knew he'd really get beaten to death if this continued, so he quickly fled next door to find help. "Seong Park, save me. I'm about to get beaten to death." Before he could catch his breath, Hanjun Park had already caught up. Mogul Choi quickly offered, "I'll give you 1 million won right away if you take care of Hanjun Park." Hearing this, Seong Park directly dropped the barbell in his hands, walked leisurely to Hanjun Park. Hanjun Park. College entrance exams cost quite a bit of money. Although Hanjun Park wasn't afraid of him, since the other party was only after money, he directly pulled out 2 million won from his pocket. "Since it's just about money, there's no need to make this bigger. Take the money and get out of my way." Seong Park took the money without a word and respectfully stepped aside. "Please, go ahead." Without hesitation, he punched Mogul Choi in the face. With a loud bang, Mogul Choi was sent flying. He was about to continue when the principal happened to pass by, seeing it was a poor kid like Hanjun Park causing trouble. Immediately started cursing, "Are you tired of living? Daring to fight in school?" Then he dragged him to the office for a scolding. "You beat up a classmate like this and damaged public property. There's nothing more to say. Pack up and get out." Looking at Hanjun Park, who was about to be expelled, Mogul Choi looked smug. "The principal took plenty of benefits from me. Let's see how you compete with me." Hanjun Park ignored the principal's presence and threw another punch. The principal couldn't stop him because he was completely enraged now. At this moment, a man in glasses and a suit walked in. "Student Hanjun Park, you can stop now." The man in glasses then handed a business card to the principal. "Hello, I'm Byung Gwan Kim from KR Law Firm." The principal was shocked upon hearing it was KR Law Firm, one of the top 10 law firms in the country. How could they come to his place? After a while, the principal's attitude did a complete 180, bowing and scraping to Hanjun Park. And Mogul Choi was expelled that very day. The reason the principal was bowing and scraping was because Junho Oh had already gotten dirt on the principal. All the dirty things he'd done were photographed. Any one of them could send him to prison. Junho Oh continued, "Now that we've humiliated Mogul Choi like this, we've basically slapped Nexus in the face. He might find people to retaliate. Can you handle it?" Hanjun Park just said coldly, "Just a small fry, nothing more." The next day, Hanjun Park's father received an invitation from the largest local martial arts gym, hiring him as head instructor. The annual salary offered was jaw-dropping. His father was excited like a child, happily saying, "Son, Dad has a job, let's eat something good today." Hearing this, Hanjun Park just said, "Congratulations, old man," and got up to buy groceries. Actually, he knew it was Junho Oh keeping his promise. Just as he went downstairs, Hanjun Park received a call from Junho Oh, saying Mogul Choi might have already brought people to your area, be careful. As soon as he finished speaking, Hanjun Park, who walked out the front door, was surrounded by a group of people. Before Hanjun Park could hang up the phone, a van charged straight at him. Completely unprepared, he was sent flying. He fell heavily to the ground without moving. Seeing this, the thugs taunted, "That's it? I thought you were so tough, now you're either dead or crippled." The next second they were stunned. Hanjun Park slowly moved his body and stood up. At this moment, his face was covered in blood as he stared at everyone. Seeing things going bad, the thugs quickly got in the car and fled. Before leaving, they didn't forget to make an international gesture of mockery. This action directly enraged Hanjun Park, who immediately started chasing the van wildly. The people in the car seeing him chase cursed, "Is this guy crazy? Does he think he's Usain Bolt?" With a loud bang, Hanjun Park actually caught up and punched the window to pieces, directly pulling out one of the thugs from inside. The others were scared out of their wits. They floored the accelerator to escape, not caring about their companion. The thug who got pulled out was in deep trouble. First came a heavy punch in response to the international gesture. "I'll only ask once. Tell me where they are." On the other side, they were already celebrating with drinks, completely ignoring their companion's fate. The leader bragged to Mogul Choi, "Although we didn't cripple him, at least we gave him a taste. There'll be plenty of chances to deal with him slowly in the future." Saying this, everyone continued partying. With a crash, the door suddenly showed a fist mark. The celebrating crowd instantly fell silent. Yellow Hair went forward to check what was happening. When he looked through the peephole and saw outside, he looked as terrified as if he'd seen a ghost. "Oh no, it's Hanjun Park who caught up." Hearing this, the group panicked. The leader calmly said, "What's there to fear? Even if he's Hanjun Park, he can't break down an iron door." Hearing the leader's words, Yellow Hair also thought it made sense. Before he could comfort himself, he was scared again with his eyes nearly popping out. A muscular arm appeared hanging on the balcony railing outside. Hanjun Park climbed up to the third floor with his bare hands and broke in through the window. This action also scared Jin Song Hwang. "This is the third floor. How did he climb up?" Without a word, Hanjun Park first threw a punch to send a thug flying to vent his anger. Two thugs tried to ambush him, grabbing weapons and swinging at him. The next second, they were taken down by Hanjun Park's elegant sweep and shoulder throw. In just a few rounds, he defeated 3 thugs. He slowly turned to look at the rest. "Next, all of you together, or one by one?" Everyone was intimidated by Hanjun Park's presence and didn't dare speak, while Jin Song Hwang still naively thought he could win with numbers. "All of you attack together. Take him down for me." At Jin Song Hwang's command, all the underlings swarmed forward. They completely forgot the man in front of them was called Hanjun Park. Hanjun Park with 1 move, 2 moves. All these thugs were taken down by him. The next second, Yellow Hair was thrown directly from the 3rd floor. He crashed heavily to the ground and passed out. At this moment, a cute and adorable girl also arrived at the scene. She couldn't help but sigh. "Hanjun Park really hits hard, but I like it." Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. Turns out she was also one of Junho Oh's people. After Junho Oh received the location, he said he'd be right there. While making the call, the girl was also enjoying the scene in front of her with great interest. The scene shifted. Everyone had been taken down by Hanjun Park. Only Jin Song Hwang was left unresolved. And Mogul Choi on the ground, without the principal's protection this time, was beaten beyond recognition by his own parents. Jin Song Hwang still acted arrogant. "Why leave me alone? Seems like you want something from me, money, status, or... Before he could finish, he was grabbed by the throat. I just want to give you a little more punishment. After saying this, he punched him in the face. At this moment, Junho-oh also arrived at the scene. Looking at the chaotic scene before him, he was puzzled. How did you turn someone else's house into this? Truly terrifying. Jin Sung-hwang was completely beaten into fear. Can humans really be this powerful? He endured the pain trying to escape through the window, otherwise he might really get beaten to death later. But as soon as he jumped out, he realized something was wrong. He was so scared he forgot this was the 3rd floor. He fell to the ground, crawling forward in struggle, finally stumbled away and escaped. Suddenly a thug behind them started laughing loudly. Both were attracted by this sudden laughter. You two idiots are in big trouble. Jin Sung-hwang's father is the president of JP Shipping Group. With his financial power, he can make you disappear without a trace. Hearing this, Junho-oh just sneered. That's really terrible news. At this time, Jin Sung-hwang had already run home. As the saying goes, when you can't win a fight, call daddy. Jin Sung-hwang tearfully told his father what happened. Haryong-hwang was furious after hearing someone actually dares to bully Haryong-hwang's child. He immediately made calls to gather people. 7 or 8 cars were dispatched to settle accounts with Hanjun Park. Haryong-hwang brought dozens of people with full intimidation. While the two had been waiting there long ago, Junho-oh mocked. Just friends having a little scuffle. Why bring so many flies? Haryong-hwang responded, Are you too tired of living? If you kneel and beg for mercy now, I might consider going easy later. Junho-oh slowly walked out from the darkness. How do you want to make a move, President Haryong? As the light illuminated, Haryong-hwang gradually saw the face of the man before him. The next second his jaw dropped. Chairman Junho. It's actually the chairman of our biggest partner company. Immediately phone calls came in saying OJ Group had terminated all contracts with the company. Hearing this, Haryong-hwang collapsed to his knees with a thud. Chairman, please forgive me this once. Everyone was also confused. Weren't they supposed to settle accounts? How did he end up kneeling? Haryong-hwang angrily told everyone to get lost quickly. They had no choice but to comply and drove away dejectedly. Haryong-hwang knelt on the ground, constantly begging Junho-oh not to cancel cooperation with their company. Junho-oh's face turned cold as he said, A company run by a bad person's father, how can you expect me to feel safe cooperating? Then Haryong-hwang pressed his son to the ground and beat him. You idiot! All you do is cause me trouble. While Junho-oh indicated that if he wanted to continue cooperation, he should send his son abroad and never let him return. Haryong-hwang agreed without thinking. Indeed, money makes emotions seem so fragile. So, shortly after on a deep-sea fishing boat, appeared a young man covered in scars, crying for his father while struggling to handle heavy fishing nets. The next day, Junho-oh called Hanjun Park to the office, telling him to try to solve things with money from now on. You don't need to step in personally, don't get unnecessarily hurt. Also, I've already gathered evidence of Mogul Choi's crimes and sent him to prison. Hanjun Park was silent for a while, then quietly said thank you, while Junho-oh just smiled without speaking. On the other side, people from the Nexus organization branch received news of Mogul Choi being sent to prison and called a meeting. One of them said, although Mogul Choi was useless, he was still a Nexus member. This makes us lose face. At this time, the Nexus branch leader, also the school bully Young Shil-min, spoke up. Didn't expect that Hanjun Park would still dare to be so arrogant, although he single-handedly took down Nexus before. But the current Nexus is no longer the old Nexus. It's time to show him some color, otherwise he'll think we're easy to bully. At this time, Hanjun Park had already transferred to this high school. As a transfer student, Hanjun Park was making his self-introduction. The content was very simple and direct. He was going to dominate this school. Such an opening only earned cold indifference from everyone in the classroom. Next, as Hanjun Park took his seat, his deskmate Yu Min-jo immediately started provoking. For such a small character, Hanjun Park chose to ignore him. Seeing his provocation failing, Yu Min-jo reached out and slapped Hanjun Park on the head. Unexpectedly, this directly earned him an elbow strike to the face from Hanjun Park. This elbow was extremely powerful. Yu Min-jo flew backward uncontrollably. Everyone in the classroom watching the excitement was shocked by what just happened, while Hanjun Park acted as if nothing happened and lay down on his desk to sleep. Outside, the weather was gloomy, making the atmosphere particularly heavy. An hour later in the corridor during break, urgent footsteps caught Hanjun Park's attention. A limping man was hurrying toward a classroom, but the man coming out of the classroom kicked the limping man down. The fallen limping man hit the ground hard, scattering his belongings everywhere, but the man didn't stop and continued attacking the limping man. At this moment, Hanjun Park could clearly see the limping man's face. The limping man was Dong-hyun Kim. His legs still hadn't fully recovered. He walked unsteadily. After being beaten, he sat dejectedly under the school building. At this moment, two former combat powerhouses met. Now Dong-hyun Kim had lost his former glory and become a cripple bullied by anyone, while Hanjun Park was confident about the current situation, full of fighting spirit. Next, Hanjun Park would use his fists to prove to Dong-hyun Kim that they were still undefeated kings. As the two met, Gyeong Chil-min was also secretly observing from upstairs. But the arrogant Gyeongchul Min thought a cripple and an idiot. The two were just a joke. So Gyeongchul Min led his underlings to prepare to take them down. Hanjun Park had been waiting in the classroom for a long time, with Gyeongchul Min's broadcast command. The hunt officially began. The entire building started to boil with excitement. Hanjun Park didn't expect that in 2 years Nexus could develop to this extent, just a small branch. Whether in terms of scale or numbers, it was incomparable to the former Nexus. In just a few dozen seconds, Hanjun Park was surrounded by a crowd, and the numbers were still increasing. Hanjun Park was also a man of few words. He immediately started fighting. 2 thugs were directly thrown out of the classroom, falling unconscious. Hanjun Park wore a red tight short-sleeved shirt, showing his war god demeanor in the chaotic scene. In the classroom, the thugs who just surrounded him were completely defeated. His eyes were sharp. "Let's see who the real prey is, you Nexus trash." Seeing this, everyone rushed forward together. Hanjun Park started with a front kick, followed by a left hook, then connected with an uppercut, directly knocking several thugs unconscious. But there were endless waves of them. After defeating one wave, another rushed up. But Hanjun Park wasn't intimidated at all, single-handedly sweeping enemies from all directions. The Nexus guys were stunned. How was this guy like a monster? But quantity leads to qualitative change. There were too many opponents. They used grappling and wrestling tactics to pin Hanjun Park down. The restrained Hanjun Park couldn't move and immediately took hundreds of punches. But they clearly underestimated Hanjun Park, who had practiced martial arts since childhood. He stomped on a thug's foot. The thug cried out in pain. Then Hanjun Park pushed back with both legs, making several thugs vomit blood. Breaking free from control, he went on a killing spree again. Blood kept flowing from his hands. Countless thugs were already lying in the corridor. He was starting to run out of stamina, gasping heavily. But this was far from over. Another batch surrounded him. The thugs mocked. "What's this? Running out of steam already? We're just getting started." Hearing this, Hanjun Park immediately flew at them with a kick. After a few minutes of bloody battle, Hanjun Park finished dealing with this group of minions. At this point, he was exhausted and sweating profusely, even starting to have trouble breathing. Suddenly, applause came from around the stair corner. "Worthy of being Hanjun Park, how many people have you taken down single-handedly? But this is as far as it goes. Because from now on, every opponent you face will be a monster." But Hanjun Park showed no sign of backing down. Instead, he was ready for battle. Seeing this, Gyeongchul Min also cursed, "What a madman, all of you attacked together." Then a group rushed at him. Suddenly, a mop flew over. This action made Hanjun Park pause for a moment. A young man in a white shirt appeared in the corridor. "Hanjun Park, you bastard are still the same as before, always like to show off alone." Time went back to before. He had once fought alongside Hanjun Park. It was because he got his leg broken by Nexus that Hanjun Park went to avenge him. In the end, even Hanjun Park was retaliated against by Nexus. Although his family later spent all their savings to barely heal his leg. He had been living in guilt and grief for these 2 years. Unable to face Hanjun Park, he chose to transfer schools. But at the new school, he still couldn't escape being bullied by thugs. You should know he used to be a hot-blooded young man like Hanjun Park. Until recently when Junho-oh found him, and invited him to join the group to bring down Nexus together. Donghyun Kim, who had been living in guilt, resolutely agreed to join them. Seeing Donghyun Kim's appearance, Hanjun Park showed a long-lost smile. Because he knew the old duo was back. Seeing someone interfere, several thugs rushed forward wanting to take him down too. But how could these idiots be Donghyun Kim's opponents? He grabbed a broom handle and gave everyone a beating. While Hanjun Park on the other side was even more fierce. Directly fighting barehanded and beating opponents powerless to fight back. The Nexus guys were dumbfounded. Is this reasonable? Hundreds of people can't beat two? With their cooperation, the thugs were beaten into retreat. Yes, this is the feeling. The feeling of fighting side by side is back. Gyeongchul Min finally couldn't sit still, his titan-like fists hammered toward the two. "Leave this Hanjun Park guy to me. What I lost 2 years ago, I'll take it all back this time." It turns out that it was Gyeongchul Min who broke his leg 2 years ago. Relying on Nexus's power, he beat people without any punishment. Back to the present, the two dodged Gyeongchul Min's attack, then very tacitly quickly ran in the same direction. Gyeongchul Min thought they were trying to escape, so he taunted, "Running away already? Two idiots." The next second, Hanjun Park grabbed his collar and threw him into the bathroom. Then Donghyun Kim used his tie to lock the door tightly. While Hanjun Park outside was responsible for the other group, the two agreed to see who could solve their opponents faster. "Gyeongchul Min, it's time to settle the score." Gyeongchul Min was still very arrogant. "If I could break your leg once, I can break it a second time." Saying this, he charged at Donghyun Kim. But Donghyun Kim was smart, not fighting him head-on, but using a stick to block his attacks. Gyeongchul Min's hand was directly cut with a big gash. This enraged him. He directly rushed forward and grabbed Donghyun Kim's waist, then lifted him up entirely, and slammed him heavily into the mirror. Gyeongchul Min mocked, "Without weapons, you think you can compete with me barehanded?" The next second, Donghyun Kim took off his shirt and wrapped it directly around his fist. Kyung Min thought he was really that brave to fight him directly, so he mindlessly rushed forward. This was just Dong Hyun Kim's misdirection. The next moment, he used his shirt to cover Kyung Min's head, then pressed him to the ground for a brutal beating, venting all the unwillingness and resentment of these 2 years. The enraged Kyung Min directly grabbed his calf and knocked him down, then instantly locked his thigh. "I said I could break your leg once, I can break it a second time." Saying this, he punched the place where Dong Hyun Kim's leg was previously broken. That injured foot hadn't fully healed. This punch made Dong Hyun Kim scream in agony. He held his knee in pain lying on the ground. Looking at Dong Hyun Kim, who had lost his fighting ability, he left harsh words, "Today I'll make you both pay a heavy price." As he was about to turn and leave, Dong Hyun Kim endured the pain and stood up. "Where are you going, you dead gorilla? I'm not down yet." Hearing this, Kyung Min turned and threw another heavy punch at Dong Hyun Kim's face. "What can you do now, waste? Just lie down obediently, stop pretending to be a hero." Dong Hyun Kim was knocked down again. Kyung Min spat, really an unkillable cockroach. But Dong Hyun Kim once again unexpectedly slowly climbed up. This is the belief in victory. Kyung Min was completely enraged. He rushed forward planning to finish Dong Hyun Kim with full force. But the next second, his face was directly cut, blood gushing continuously. Turns out Dong Hyun Kim had grabbed broken mirror shards from the ground and held them in his hand. He grabbed Kyung Min's collar. "How could I possibly lose to a lackey like you? If I lose here, how can I face Hanjun Park?" This headbutt directly made Kyung Min's vision blur. Remembering all the memories of these 2 years, Dong Hyun Kim's emotions completely exploded. "Go to hell, Kyung Min." Dong Hyun Kim used all his strength to throw a heavy punch. Kyung Min was knocked to the ground and never got up again. Dong Hyun Kim dragged his injured leg and stumbled to open the door, while Hanjun Park had already taken down everyone else. "Looks like I lost." Saying this, he was about to collapse. Hanjun Park came over in time to support him. Seeing this, he couldn't help but smile. Just like that, after the two worked together to defeat hundreds of people, they left coolly. At this time, another group of middle-aged men arrived outside. Turns out he was the biggest boss of this school. "To catch one guy, you actually made such a beautiful school like this. Looks like if I don't make him pay today, how can I maintain my reputation in the future? Go capture Hanjun Park for me. Just cripple 3 parts of his body." At this time, a figure appeared to stop them. "Boss Lee, Children's Affairs, we adults shouldn't interfere, right?" Guan Kim from KR Law Firm came. Then the two groups came to the classroom to negotiate. Boss Lee said sarcastically, "Didn't expect Hanjun Park to be so rich, actually able to hire you guys. Tell me, how are you going to solve this after turning my school into this?" Then Guan Kim didn't waste words and immediately brought out 3 boxes. "Don't worry, Boss Lee, what I brought won't disappoint you." Boss Lee said, "But I have to remind you, I only accept large denominations." When his subordinate opened the boxes, he was immediately dumbfounded. Inside were all dirt on him. These 3 boxes of stuff were enough to keep him in prison for life. Boss Lee's face immediately darkened. "Lawyer Kim, didn't you think about your life being in danger while collecting this stuff?" But Guan Kim wasn't intimidated at all. "Boss Lee, do you think you or my law firm would win if we fight to the end? I have backups of all the materials. If this stuff gets out, it would be very unfavorable for you." Hearing this, Boss Lee had no choice but to tell his men to put away their knives. "Tell me, what do you want? Management rights of this school?" On the other side, after Hanjun Park left the battlefield, he immediately sent Dong Hyun Kim to the hospital. And Junho got him the country's top doctors. The doctor said the surgery was very successful, the chance of recovery was very high. Hearing this, Hanjun Park's worried heart finally relaxed. At this time, Junho was in his coffee shop appreciating news of Kyung Min being sent to prison, while beside him sat a reporter interviewing a white-haired young man. After the interview, he politely bowed. You might never imagine this well-mannered person is secretly the ultimate boss of Nexus organization, Cheon-soo Kim. Cheon-soo Kim came to sit next to Junho. He smiled and said, "This interview was arranged by you, wasn't it, Chairman Junho? It's truly my honor to meet someone of your level here." Junho mocked, "All right, stop pretending. Aren't you ashamed saying this? Did you forget who I am?" Cheon-soo Kim still acted dumb, saying he didn't know what he was talking about. Saying this, he stood up and respectfully bent down, extending his hand. "I'm very pleased to meet you today," while Junho completely ignored him. Seeing this, Cheon-soo Kim still politely bowed to Junho, then turned to leave. At this time, Junho spoke, "You should have seen Mogul Choi and Kyung Min being sent to prison. I hope next time I see you, you can still manage your expression like this." Cheon-soo Kim's face darkened, still walking away without looking back. After getting in the car, a subordinate asked, "Are we just going to let them be?" Cheon-soo Kim's face darkened as he replied, "Since they pulled the trigger first, we have to give some response. All of you better be alert, because this could be the largest scale confrontation in domestic history." So Cheon-soo Kim immediately gathered Nexus headquarters executives after returning. Regional leaders from all areas were present. Every headquarters executive was no joke, each one ruthless and merciless. Leader of Yongsan chapter Dongshan Baek said disdainfully, "Does dealing with just one person require such a big fuss?" Hearing this, leader of Chungcheong chapter Mungil Lee immediately laughed. "Since you just joined Nexus last year, it's normal you don't know Hanjun Park. You should know, 2 years ago, something unimaginable happened. Back then, to subdue high school organizations in various regions, our people were winning all the way. Only Hanjun Park's region couldn't be taken down. None of the people we sent came back intact. He single-handedly rekindled hope for high schools in that entire region. That year, Nexus almost completely collapsed. Dongshan Baek still looked disbelieving. Can one person really achieve this level? While Mungil Lee indicated whether it's possible or not. You'll know when you see that guy in action." At this moment, Cheonsu Kim also arrived at the scene. "I'm sure you all know why I've gathered everyone here today. Park Hanjun has begun to make his move. This confrontation is inevitable." Another arrogant subordinate leader of Gyeonggi chapter Taesu Choi still doesn't take Park Hanjun seriously. That was all 2 years ago. He says that summoning everyone for just one person is making too big a deal out of it. Upon hearing these words, Cheonsu Kim's face, which had been wearing a smile, immediately turned cold. Taesu Choi was directly frightened into trembling by his expression. Because Cheonsu Kim understood Hanjun Park's strength, he had to be cautious. Cheonsu Kim indicated that his previous methods were now ineffective against him, because he now had backing too. At this moment, the leader of Incheon chapter, who had been silent all along, spoke up. "Cheonsu, let me handle this matter. I've been waiting for this day for a long time. I want to settle old scores with double the payback." And Cheonsu Kim agreed. Indeed, leaving this matter to Insu Nam was the most appropriate choice. After all, the grudge between the two was bound to be settled sooner or later. After getting permission, Insu Nam immediately summoned his subordinates. "Finally, the day has come. This time, I won't just make you kneel, you'll have to kowtow to me too." Then he set off with his men. At this time, Junwoo brought Hanjun Park to a sealed-off building. He felt it was time to tell Hanjun Park why he wanted to destroy the Nexus organization. It turned out this house was his former home. 2 years ago, he accidentally provoked Nexus. For this, he suffered Nexus's brutal retaliation, and his entire family perished in the flames. Only he, who happened to be out, survived. Junwoo used his accident insurance and all his family assets to start a business. Perhaps blessed by heaven, he became a nationally renowned corporate chairman within 2 years. Therefore, he vowed to make Nexus pay blood for blood. On the way home, Junwoo called and chatted casually with Seo-hyun Choi. He didn't expect to actually tell someone about his background. It was really beneath him. But Seo-hyun Choi on the other end of the phone laughed heartily, asking if he now felt like he had made a friend. And Jun Feng seemed not to deny it either. Suddenly, several motorcycles surrounded his Rolls-Royce and frantically splashed paint all over the car. After the paint blocked his vision, the car directly lost control and crashed into the guardrail. Hearing the commotion on the phone, Seo-hyun Choi immediately sensed something was wrong, shouting loudly but getting no response. At this time, Insu Nam picked up Junwoo's phone. "I'm taking him away. If you want him back, tell Hanjun Park to come to Incheon." So Seo-hyun Choi immediately rode her motorcycle to find Hanjun Park. "Get on quickly, Hanjun Park. Something happened to Junwoo. Oh, it must be those people from Incheon." On the other side, Junwoo was tied up in a large warehouse. A 400-pound fat man was staring at him intently, afraid he might escape. Junwoo suddenly burst into laughter, his face full of mockery. "You're from that Incheon gang, right? Don't you remember your former boss knelt before Hanjun Park?" Hearing about the past humiliation, the fat man couldn't help but want to punch him. Just then, a subordinate came running in panic to report that Hanjun Park had arrived. Hearing this, Junwoo mocked, "Don't get beaten to your knees again later." Unable to bear it any longer, the fat man threw him out entirely. This throw made Jun Feng suffer quite a bit. After all, he wasn't Hanjun Park. At this time, Seo-hyun Choi brought Hanjun Park racing over, with quite a few pursuers following behind. Seo-hyun Choi looked back mockingly. "With this level of skill, you still want to catch up with me?" The next second, she was slapped in the face as she slammed on the brakes. She complained, "Damn, why is there a giant fried pork cutlet in front?" Seo-hyun Choi was so scared she quickly hid behind Hanjun Park. The fat man indicated that if they wanted to save someone, they should obediently follow him. Along the way, Seo-hyun Choi curiously poked the lard on the fat man's body. Like a busybody, she kept asking, "Why are you so fat? How much do you spend on food per meal?" The fat man's violent temper couldn't stand it. "Say one more word, even if you're a woman, I'll still hit you." At this moment, Hanjun Park stepped forward to block Seo-hyun Choi. "Try touching her and see what happens." Looking at Hanjun Park's arrogant appearance, the fat man finally couldn't hold back, raising his 400-pound body's huge fist and swinging it over. You should know this fat man was a supergiant baby from birth. In middle school, he was already close to 150 kilograms and 2 meters tall. A punch from such a heavyweight would either kill or cripple an ordinary person. But that day, he experienced the feeling of flying for the first time. He was sent flying and crashed heavily in front of everyone. Even the fat man's accomplice were seeing the fat man in such a sorry state for the first time. Hanjun Park came to the warehouse entrance, facing 180 people. still walking in with an unchanged expression. Seeing this, everyone picked up their weapons and surrounded him. At this moment, Nam shouted loudly, "Don't anyone move, let me handle this myself. Long time no see, Hanjun Park." Hanjun Park thought for a moment before remembering who he was. It turned out he was the younger brother of the former Incheon boss. When the former Incheon boss knelt, he was standing nearby. Nam, thinking of his brother's humiliation of kneeling 2 years ago, threw a punch at Hanjun Park. That fist was as fast as lightning, directly creating a gust of wind on Hanjun Park's face. The next second, his face was actually cut. Even Junuo was surprised by this scene. How fast must that punch have been to cut the face? Seeing Hanjun Park had no reaction, he threw another punch at his face. "Don't disappoint me. These 2 years of desperate training have been waiting for today." Hanjun Park tried to counterattack but was easily dodged. Nam mocked, "You're too slow. Show me some real strength." After Hanjun Park took a heavy punch head-on, he was knocked back repeatedly. In the subsequent duel, Hanjun Park was always at a disadvantage. This was the first time since his comeback that he encountered such a formidable opponent. Storm-like punches continuously smashed into his face. Seoyeon Choi began to worry, asking, "Why does it seem like Hanjun Park can't win?" Junuo indicated they should continue observing for now. "From what I know about him, he's not someone who would be defeated easily. He's been training in martial arts with his martial arts gym, owning father since childhood. Whether it's stamina, perception, or strength, he's like a monster. He should be figuring out Nam's attack patterns." As soon as he finished speaking, another punch landed, and Nam directly made Hanjun Park spit blood. Then, with a clean shoulder throw, he knocked Hanjun Park down. He was thrown heavily to the ground. Seeing this, the subordinates were delighted that their boss was beating Hanjun Park into retreat. But Nam didn't dare to relax his guard. Because in expert duels, a counterattack often happens in just an instant. At this time, Hanjun Park had been beaten until his eyes were bleeding, and his vision was gradually turning red. Nam thought this was a good opportunity and pressed his advantage. When he thought he was about to succeed, Hanjun Park dodged. This move also startled Nam. When he wanted to create distance, it was already too late. Hanjun Park threw a punch. Junuo excitedly shouted, "Here it comes, here it comes! The good show is about to begin!" Hanjun Park raised his steel-like fist and smashed it straight into Nam's head. Damn, how did he suddenly seem like a different person? Could it be that he was figuring out my attack patterns just now? But I haven't used my full strength yet. Then Nam started swinging his fists frantically like a madman. His speed was actually twice as fast as before. Junuo said teasingly, "It should be over now." As soon as he finished speaking, Hanjun Park's fist had already landed on Nam's face. Nam's face was immediately punched inward. At this moment, he finally understood why his brother had knelt back then. It turned out he was trying to protect us brothers. If he hadn't surrendered, the brothers who followed him would have suffered too. Hanjun Park simply wasn't someone ordinary people could defeat. Seeing their boss beaten like this, the subordinates wanted to rush over to help, but they were loudly stopped by Nam. The subordinates on the scene instantly fell silent. With a thud, Nam fell to his knees. "I accept this defeat wholeheartedly." The same scene repeated itself. The subordinates similarly couldn't understand Nam's actions, especially the fried pork cutlet who had just woken up, was clamoring to fight again. Nam shouted to stop him and begged Hanjun Park to spare them too. At this time, seeing that Hanjun Park had completely won, Junuo stepped forward to tell them, "In any struggle, only the one who protects the most people is the victor. Your brother won before, and today you, Nam, have also won." And Junuo also told everyone, "The money the Incheon chapter owed to Nexus has been fully repaid by me, and I've arranged technical schools for all of you. Just work hard to earn money and pay me back in the future." With this, under Nam's announcement, Incheon withdrew from the Nexus organization. On the other side, leader of Gyeonggi chapter, Taesu Choi, also received news that Nam had been beaten to his knees. As expected, he's as useless as his brother, but I didn't have much hope for him anyway. Taesu Choi was Nexus's biggest financial backer, using illegal gambling and loan sharking to make profits. The disheveled woman in front of him tremblingly revealed her cards. As expected, it was another losing hand. Taesu Choi immediately ordered his men to take her to the workstation. Even though she struggled desperately, it was futile. What awaited her was endless torment. The woman was so scared that tears and snot flowed together, desperately shouting, "I'm willing to do what you said last time." Taesu Choi turned around with an evil smile. "Really? Didn't you say you had a good relationship?" The woman indicated it didn't matter. She would complete the mission. Then Taesu Choi extended a photo to the woman. The person in the photo was Seo-hyun Choi. Meanwhile, Hanjun Park and Junuo were discussing how to deal with Taesu Choi. If they could eliminate him, it would be equivalent to destroying Nexus's biggest financial backing, which would definitely severely damage Nexus. So they found a victim who had been lured into gambling by Taesu Choi. When Taesu Choi was mentioned, he even trembled all over. But after understanding Junuo's background and strength, he finally felt relieved. According to him, he used to be a model student who had never even been in a fight. But inadvertently, he made some interesting friends. Those friends kept treating him, taking him to live extravagantly and calling him brother, and he became addicted to this feeling. But the good times didn't last long. Soon those guys revealed their true colors, taking him to gamble. Under his friend's constant temptation, he gradually became addicted to gambling. It wasn't until he lost everything that he realized the seriousness of the situation. The money he lost was stolen from his father's savings account. Just when he was at his wit's end, Tae-soo Choi conveniently appeared to lend him money. Thinking about making a comeback, he accepted Tae-soo Choi's money without hesitation. Little did he know that money was a high-interest loan. In just 2 months, the interest had rolled up to 5 million. If he didn't repay, they would force him to do outrageous things. Now he was being tortured by them and living in misery. After hearing this, Junwoo indicated that next, he just needed to do as he said, and the debt wouldn't need to be repaid at all. Shortly after, Jang Kaiming swaggered into the gambling den carrying a bag. "I have money again now, let's gamble." The staff was secretly delighted. This fool was here to give away money again. In the first round, Jang Kaiming put all his chips all in. The staff also mocked, "You've become quite bold." Then he secretly drew a card from his sleeve trying to cheat. Little did he know, Hanjun Park had been hiding in the shadows waiting for a long time. Hanjun Park kicked the staff member's face until it was distorted. Jiang Kaiming on the side saw the card hidden in the sleeve and cursed, "You beast, you were indeed cheating." Seeing someone causing trouble, a group of bodyguards immediately rushed over, wanting to teach Hanjun Park a lesson. The next second, they were sent flying. Good, now there are no trash to interfere. Let the game begin. The staff member tremblingly tried to throw the ball into the roulette. Bang. The staff member's hand along with the ball was smashed. Unexpectedly, there was a hidden mechanism inside the ball. "So you make money by relying on this kind of thing?" Poof. One punch knocked him unconscious. In just one day, 3 of Tae-soo Choi's gambling dens were bankrupted by Hanjun Park. On the other side, Tae-soo Choi, who had received the news, had actually already taken action. Seo-yeon Choi was also brought before Tae-soo Choi by her best friend. Tae-soo Choi directly stated, "As long as you reveal Junwoo's plan to me, I'll pay you 3 times what Junwoo is paying you." Hearing this, Seo-yeon Choi's eyes lit up, and she agreed without thinking. This reaction also left Tae-soo Choi confused. How was this different from what he had imagined? He immediately said seriously, "If you're playing tricks on me, you know what the consequences will be. You could really lose your life." Looking at the large sum of money that had been deposited, Seo-yeon Choi said with a smile, "Don't worry, I definitely won't lie. Let me see what Junwoo's plan is now." She started counting down. 10, 9, 8. Tae-soo Choi looked puzzled. "What are you doing for no reason? Don't you want to know Junwoo's plan? In 3 seconds, Hanjun Park will come kill you." Bang! A bodyguard was kicked out along with the door. "You guys really made us search hard." It turned out this was all part of their plan. Junwoo had anticipated that Tae-soo Choi would definitely target Seo-yeon Choi. For this reason, he had already arranged for Hanjun Park to secretly protect her. A group of reckless guys still rushed forward hoping to stop Hanjun Park. But he only needed 1 round to KO all these cats and dogs. Next, it was the unlucky Tae-soo Choi's turn. Before he could even see Hanjun Park clearly, he was already punched so hard that his nose caved in. Tae-soo Choi covered his nose and shouted, "Charlie! Weedy! You two go together!" Charlie and Wide were indeed Tae-soo Choi's right-hand men. Over the years, they had successfully intimidated many people. Hearing this, the two immediately tore off their shirts, showing off their muscular bodies, then walked behind Hanjun Park to hold him down. Seeing that the two had started fighting, Tae-soo Choi slowly stood up. The next second, he actually fled in embarrassment, abandoning his image. It turned out that although Charlie and Wide looked very formidable, they were actually 2 good-for-nothings who were only suitable for intimidation. These 2 idiots definitely couldn't last more than 3 minutes against Hanjun Park. Sure enough, Hanjun Park only needed 2 minutes to beat them until their own mothers wouldn't recognize them. By the time Hanjun Park finished dealing with the 2, Tae-soo Choi had already disappeared without a trace. The next day, Junwoo indicated that since they didn't catch him this time, he'd better be careful. After all, that guy was Nexus's biggest financial backer. Being able to sit in his current position was definitely not simple. At this time, Tae-soo Choi had also escaped to a hidden basement. "Have you completed what I asked you to do?" the man with glasses said confidently. "Of course. As long as the money is sufficient, Hanjun Park will definitely die." As the enter key was pressed, all computer screens began to flicker. A bounty notice for Hanjun Park appeared on various gambling and illegal websites, worth up to 2 billion won. Anyone who could injure him would receive a reward. Once the news was released, everyone went crazy. That was a full 2 billion. Tae-soo Choi looked at the bounty notice and mocked. "Do you think I got to where I am today by relying on strength? There's nothing in this world that money can't solve." At this time, Hanjun Park was just leaving school to go home. Suddenly, a girl called out to him from behind, "Oh, sorry, I mistook you for someone else." Hanjun Park didn't mind and turned to leave. Just as Hanjun Park turned around, the girl pulled out a knife from her backpack and stabbed directly at Hanjun Park's back. Fortunately, he was agile enough to dodge this knife. Before he could ask what was happening, someone behind him swung an iron rod at him. But Hanjun Park seemed to have eyes in the back of his head and backhanded a devastating blow. "Speak up. I have no grudge against you, so why attack me?" The girl quickly explained, "I'm sorry. It's all because I was blinded by money." Looking at this 2 billion bounty notice, he knew it must be Tae-Soo Choi's doing. Then someone behind them shouted, "Hanjun Park is there, the walking 2 billion!" As soon as the words fell, hundreds and thousands of people swarmed over. But these were all ordinary people who couldn't withstand even half a punch from Hanjun Park. Fighting them was like a max-level boss grinding in a newbie village. Until a child's appearance made Hanjun Park freeze. These were all ordinary people, and getting entangled with them was meaningless. When Junwoo learned that Hanjun Park was being hunted, he immediately called to tell him to hang on, "I'll send support right away." But Hanjun Park indicated, "These small fries can't do anything to me. Just send me Tae-Soo Choi's location." After hanging up, Junwoo was completely furious. "So, that's how you want to play? Looks like I need to use my company's manpower." Soon Hanjun Park carved out a bloody path. When he rushed toward the only exit, he didn't expect this was a trap set by others. The exit was already completely blocked by hundreds of big men. Looking at the weapons in these people's hands, he knew these were Nexus people. At this moment, Hanjun Park actually became excited. He could finally fight to his heart's content. He unleashed all his earlier anger on these Nexus people. Those Nexus good-for-nothings simply couldn't withstand Hanjun Park's fierce attacks. Various cool fighting techniques made them cry for their mothers. In just a few minutes, he had already taken down more than half of them. Fuck, is this even human? They didn't tell us upstairs that he was a monster. At this time, Junwoo called again. "Hanjun Park, I've already sent you Tae-Soo Choi's location." "Good. I'll go settle accounts with him now." With every step Hanjun Park took, those Nexus people were scared out of their wits. When he walked past, not a single person dared to step forward to stop him. Seeing that so many people couldn't stop Hanjun Park alone, Tae-Soo Choi also panicked a bit. "Raise the bounty to 3 billion. I don't believe 3 billion can't take his life." Just as the man with glasses was about to comply, the screen suddenly went out of control, and the footage switched to Junwoo. Seeing this, Tae-Soo Choi panicked and tried to turn off the display, but was told, "Nothing you do now will work. Your rookie-level defense system, my company can hack into it casually. Since you dare to put a death warrant on my brother, I'll let you taste the same medicine." As the enter key was pressed, Hanjun Park's bounty notice was replaced with Tae-Soo Choi's bounty notice. Once the news was released, Tae-Soo Choi's internal people were the first to be stirred up. And those people who had originally been hunting Hanjun Park, seeing the bounty increase, immediately switched sides and started hunting Tae-Soo Choi. At this time, amid urgent door-pounding sounds, Tae-Soo Choi finally came to his senses, knowing the situation was hopeless. He called the man with glasses and tried to escape with the money. On the way, he didn't forget to comfort himself. As long as there are green hills, there's no fear of running out of firewood. But before they even got out of the fire escape, the man with glasses who was running ahead was sent flying back. Looking at the man with glasses on the ground with his face beaten beyond recognition, Tae-Soo Choi slowly looked up. In the dim stairwell, Hanjun Park was coldly watching him. This suddenly appearing man almost scared Tae-Soo Choi's urine out, but being a leader after all, after calming down and knowing he couldn't beat Hanjun Park, he immediately tried to threaten with words. Unfortunately, before he could open his mouth, Hanjun Park kicked him in the face. Then Tae-Soo Choi, lying on the ground, tried to threaten with Hanjun Park's family. The result was still Hanjun Park's iron fist. Seeing threats didn't work, Tae-Soo Choi offered various monetary bargaining chips. In the end, he was still beaten by Hanjun Park until he cried for his parents. Just when Tae-Soo Choi was at his wit's end, and throwing money from his pocket everywhere, Hanjun Park suddenly stopped beating him. Just when Tae-Soo Choi was celebrating that Hanjun Park had spared him for the money, he saw at the other end of the stairwell a large group of civilians rushing over with clubs. Their target was Tae-Soo Choi, who now had a 2 billion bounty. What followed in the stairwell was inhumane mob beating and heart-wrenching screams. Days later, under Junwoo's arrangement, Tae-Soo Choi's gambling websites were completely shut down. The civilians who had originally owed debts also received appropriate compensation. Thus, Nexus Organization's biggest economic pillar, Gyeonggi Chapter, was completely eliminated. And at this time, Tae-Soo Choi, lying in the hospital, also welcomed questioning from Cheon-soo Kim. The furious Cheon-soo Kim would also launch another fierce retaliation. On the other side, Dong-yeon Kim, who had just been discharged from the hospital, saw several thugs bullying a man. After seeing the rings on their hands, Dong-yeon Kim immediately knew they were from Nexus. In the man's desperate eyes, Dong-yeon Kim seemed to see his former self. Just as those thugs were about to strike, suddenly Dong-yeon Kim's warm-up exercises attracted their attention. One of the thugs stepped forward and cursed, "Are you blind? Can't you see what we're doing?" Swish! The thug was kicked by Dong-yeon Kim's right leg lift until his face caved in. Looking at the suffering thug, Dong-yeon Kim also smiled. "Looks like my body has recovered pretty well." The remaining thugs also mindlessly rushed forward. Supporting characters are always just supporting characters. They only ever get beaten up. A few minutes later, the thugs who had been so arrogant were completely subdued. Looks like I'm still not fully recovered. It took several minutes to deal with such small fries. Looking at that familiar figure, the thugs finally recognized who this person was. Could the rumors be true? Have Hanjun Park and Donghyun Kim really reunited? The two who were once called the strongest fists of the era were very famous. 2 years ago, they created many legends in their battles with Nexus. Recently, news of them defeating Incheon Chapter and Gyeonggi Chapter should be true. They are once again receiving attention under this name. For many people, it's entertainment. For some people, it's fear. And for certain people, they represent hope. After suffering a setback, Cheon-soo Kim came to a secluded rooftop. At this time, someone had already been waiting for a long time, so the rumors are true. I heard Hanjun Park has returned. You coming to me means Hanjun Park is still quite capable, right? Cheon-soo Kim indicated that was correct. So now they needed someone who had once subdued him to be the opponent. Moon Young-baek suddenly laughed loudly. Do you still remember 2 years ago? You used me to catch Hanjun Park, and then ruthlessly abandoned me. Now that Hanjun Park has returned, you come to me. Do I look like a fool? Cheon-soo Kim sincerely apologized. There really were unavoidable circumstances back then. As long as you're willing to help me this time, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Moon Young-baek's eyes became sharp. What if I want to be the master of Nexus? Upon hearing this, Cheon-soo Kim immediately emanated terrifying murderous intent. Moon Young-baek, can you take responsibility for what you're saying? Moon Young-baek slowly walked over. I'm just joking with you. Wait and see. I'll handle this cleanly this time too. So 2 days later, Junwoo-oh suddenly received a phone call. Inchin's second-in-command, Fried Pork Cutlet, had been attacked. In the hospital, looking at Fried Pork Cutlet's injured knee, Donghyun Kim immediately recognized this as Moon Young-baek's handiwork, because his own knee was also courtesy of him. Back in the gym, Donghyun Kim was training desperately. The reason he worked so hard was to not drag Hanjun Park down in future battles. At this time, So-yeon Choi found Donghyun Kim wanting to learn about some things. I heard those Nexus people have brought Moon Young-baek back. He's been living abroad before, so I could collect very little information about him. Now I need you to tell me about your past with him. At the mention of Bai Wenying, Donghyun Kim instantly became murderous. Then he calmed down. In the field of fighting, there are only 3 people who can be called geniuses. 2 of them are naturally Hanjun Park and Cheon-soo Kim. The last one is the scumbag Moon Young-baek. 2 years ago, after Hanjun Park and I advanced in school, we controlled the entire area. Almost no one dared to covet this territory, including Nexus. After a few months, there was supposedly a transfer student from abroad. On his first day of enrollment, he defeated all the third-year students. Since he came, many things became different. Moon Young-baek turned several surrounding schools into colonies, then assigned rankings and made them fight each other. He did these things for no reason, purely because he was that kind of scumbag. Soon he set his sights on me, but he didn't come to me directly. Instead, he specifically targeted people around me. When I went to fight, he was nowhere to be seen. The next day, he would target others again, making everyone think I was avoiding him. Just when my mentality was collapsing, he appeared before me. He kept spouting trash talk. I heard you're very strong, but you look like a weakling. With my mentality collapsed, I started attacking frantically, without any technique. He seized the opportunity and easily repelled me. I have to admit he was strong. If Hanjun Park is a rampaging monster, then he's a venomous snake injecting poison into opponents' wounds. But he also underestimated me at my peak. The fighting spirit in my body was completely ignited, and I engaged in a life-and-death struggle with him. We fought back and forth, evenly matched. Suddenly, someone shouted that the police were coming, so we were forced to stop fighting. But this matter didn't end there. Soon, he gathered 100 elite fighters from surrounding schools, planning to take down both me and Hanjun Park in one fell swoop. But they simply didn't understand the horror of Hanjun Park. Hanjun Park took off his shirt and walked into the crowd. You're Moon Young-baek? I heard you want to take down me and Donghyun Kim. Moon Young-baek got cocky. If you beg for mercy now, I might consider it. Before he could finish, Hanjun Park interrupted. Stop barking and let's go directly. Moon Young-baek stopped talking nonsense and directly called for action. Everyone rushed forward eagerly. The current Hanjun Park can fight 100 people, let alone Hanjun Park at his peak 2 years ago. Everyone could only serve as background in front of him. The so-called 100 elite fighters were just achievements to create Hanjun Park's legend. Moon Young-baek, who thought he was so formidable, became utterly pathetic. Until the very end, he couldn't believe he would lose so completely. In his perception, there shouldn't be humans strong enough to be so abnormally powerful. Clearly, he had also defeated countless masters and never tasted defeat. How could he be so pathetic in Hanjun Park's hands? Just like that, he was completely trampled under Hanjun Park's feet. Hanjun Park spat. Moon Young-baek, listen carefully. You will never be able to lift your head again. Don't ever forget, or it won't be as simple as today. After this battle, rumors were completely spread by people. Some even questioned whether Nexus should also bow to Hanjun Park. Therefore, Nexus's absolute status was threatened. When Nexus wanted to deal with me and Hanjun Park head-on, what they got was Inshan's kneeling, and the defeats of Yoongi and Gangwon, as well as some other notable guys all falling to our fists. At that time, everyone thought we could destroy Nexus. This gave Cheonsu Kim quite a headache. At this time, Moon-gil Lee suggested private retaliation, but Cheonsu Kim expressed disagreement, saying that now was the critical period for Nexus to turn from black to white, and they couldn't tarnish their reputation at this crucial moment. When Cheonsu Kim wanted to take action personally, a man wearing sunglasses stopped him. "You can't take this risk. If you take action personally, it's equivalent to gambling with the entire Nexus. It's just one area, no need for such a big fuss. Let's do as Moon-gil Lee said. Private retaliation is okay, as long as we don't use Nexus people. Isn't there just the right person we can use?" After being thoroughly beaten, Moon-young-baek remained depressed all day long. At this moment, Cheonsu Kim found him and proposed that he had a way to bring down Hanjun Park with 100% certainty. Blinded by thoughts of revenge, he agreed without hesitation. One day after school, just as I was thinking about going home, I was suddenly surrounded by a dense crowd of people. Nexus, who had always advocated for fair fights, was now secretly using weapons, which is exactly why I let my guard down. There were simply too many of them. Plus, with Moon-young-baek there, I was ultimately outnumbered and captured. They also used me to lure Hanjun Park over. Eager to save me, Hanjun Park rushed in alone, not knowing this was a trap specifically set for him. Seeing me brutally tortured, Hanjun Park was completely enraged. "It seems you couldn't keep our agreement, Moon-young-baek." Remembering the day he was trampled under Hanjun Park's feet, Moon-young-baek struck my knee with a club. That's how the injury on my knee came about. Otherwise, a small fry like Young Cheol-min could never have hurt me. Seeing this, Hanjun Park rushed over like a madman, but this played right into Moon-young-baek's scheme. Just a few steps forward, he was entangled by iron chains, with several thugs already waiting for him. The others, seeing Hanjun Park trapped, charged forward with clubs. They beat Hanjun Park mercilessly. With his movement restricted, he had no way to fight back. Watching Hanjun Park at a disadvantage, Moon-young-baek's face became twisted with malice. He picked up an iron rod and struck my leg again. That kind of pain went straight to the bone. Moon-young-baek taunted, "Come save him! Aren't you supposed to be close brothers?" Hanjun Park's mental defenses completely collapsed. He threw off the nearby thugs and began desperately pulling at the iron chains, his mind filled with thoughts of how Moon-young-baek should die. The people around thought he'd gone mad, actually trying to break iron chains. With a crack, one iron chain snapped. For Hanjun Park, he could always create miracles. The thugs were scared out of their wits, shouting, "He's about to break free! Hurry up and pour the gasoline!" Just as Hanjun Park was about to break the last chain, Moon-young-baek played dirty and launched a sneak attack. After taking a blow from the iron rod, Hanjun Park froze in place. With a thud, Hanjun Park finally fell, spitting blood. Moon-young-baek shouted triumphantly, "You're finally kneeling before me! I won! See that? I won!" At this point, the fire had already spread. Everyone quickly dragged away the still venting Moon-young-baek, leaving only me and Hanjun Park lying in a pool of blood. Hanjun Park gradually regained consciousness and stubbornly stood up, rescuing me from my bonds. Seeing Hanjun Park like this, my heart was truly breaking. I really hated myself for being so useless and holding him back. Otherwise, he never would have lost a scum like Moon-young-baek. Although in the end, he saved me from those bastards. The situation was far more complicated than that. The police soon came knocking, saying we were involved in arson. Witnesses and evidence kept appearing. The most damning evidence was that the burned building belonged to Cheonsu Kim, and they hired top lawyers to prosecute us. They also continuously tormented our parents. Faced with enormous compensation, Hanjun Park's father had to borrow money from everyone around him. They say borrowing money is the ultimate test of relationships, and that couldn't be more true. He asked every friend and relative around him but couldn't borrow a single cent. Unable to bear this pressure, Hanjun Park ran off alone. At that moment, we who thought we feared nothing were utterly defeated by money and power. To avoid dragging his father down further, Hanjun Park ultimately went to compromise with Cheonsu Kim. No matter how the other party beat him, he didn't fight back. He silently bore all of this alone, while I was still lying in the hospital like a useless waste. Seeing the submissive Hanjun Park, Cheonsu Kim showed an extremely satisfied expression. Feeling unwilling, Hanjun Park? But what can you do about it? This is the difference between the real power that runs the world and brute force. Since you've chosen to submit, never forget what happened today, and never provoke me again in the future. Live quietly. Do you understand? To keep his family from being implicated, even the invincible Hanjun Park could only swallow his pride and nod. Good, you made the right choice. Now let me see your sincerity. After speaking, a group of people immediately surrounded Hanjun Park. He became the target of the scum's anger. Speaking of this, Donghyun Kim's face was filled with self-blame. It's all my fault that I held Hanjun Park back 2 years ago. After hearing their story, So-hyun Choi also felt very angry. She gently stroked Donghyun Kim's head. You've suffered for these 2 years, but from now on you don't need to worry about these problems anymore, because this time we're here with you. Hearing this, Donghyun Kim was also ignited with fighting spirit. This time, we will definitely win. Just wait and see, Jeonsu Kim. At this moment, Junwoo Oh was also plotting all of this. The duel between both sides was about to begin. That night, Hanjun Park was on his way to find Donghyun Kim. Suddenly, the roar of cars came from behind. 2 sedans charged straight at him. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and dodged the white car's impact. Before he could catch his breath, another black car rushed up from behind. He quickly rolled to the side to avoid the car's pursuit. Then the car stopped behind him. The person inside threw out a card. The card slowly fell in front of Hanjun Park. It turned out to be a photo, and the people in the photo were Seoyeon Choi and Donghyun Kim. Then someone claiming to be Moon-young Baek sent Hanjun Park a text message. Donghyun Kim has been caught by me again. If you don't want his leg to be crippled again, hurry to this place. Seeing the news that Donghyun Kim had been captured, he frantically rushed to the address the other party mentioned. On the other side, Donghyun Kim had just finished training at the gym. A motorcycle came charging at him aggressively. Donghyun Kim sensed something was wrong. Sure enough, the next second an iron rod swung at his head. Fortunately, he was on guard and dodged the attack. Seeing that the attack failed, the person on the motorcycle threw down a photo and sped away. After Donghyun Kim picked up the photo, he discovered that the person in it was actually Hanjun Park. Then he also received news that Hanjun Park had been kidnapped. Donghyun Kim quickly took out his phone to call Hanjun Park, but no matter how many times he called, no one answered. Having no choice, he had to rush to the designated location to see what was going on. But unexpectedly, this was just an abandoned school with not a soul in sight. Only then did Donghyun Kim realize he had fallen into a trap. If this continued, the same thing that happened 2 years ago would happen again. It turned out this was all a conspiracy by the Nexus organization. Just recently, when Donghyun Kim went to shower after working out, a sneaky person crept in. He carefully opened the locker, then took out Donghyun Kim's phone and planted a virus. It was this virus that blocked the communication between the two. So what happened next occurred. Jeonsu Kim wanted to use Moon-young Baek to pull the same trick on Hanjun Park again. With Hanjun Park's personality, seeing his brother in danger, he would definitely rush to the rescue regardless of his own safety, to ensure everything was foolproof. Jeonsu Kim also sent the leader of Chungcheong chapter Moon-gil Lee to help Moon-young Baek, although Moon-gil Lee didn't want to have any dealings with that dirty guy. But since it was the boss's order, he had to obey. At this time, Moon-young Baek had already brought people to the designated location and set up a trap, just waiting for Hanjun Park to fall into the snare. Then Moon-gil Lee also arrived. Behind him, he brought an elite team under his command. When the two met, neither respected the other, looking like they were about to fight. To complete the task given by Jeonsu Kim, Moon-gil Lee had to break the deadlock first and extend his hand in goodwill. But Moon-young Baek acted in his own way, indicating that they were just there to make up numbers, and to defeat Hanjun Park, having him there was enough. The sky gradually darkened. After waiting for 2.5 hours, Moon-young Baek became a bit impatient. That kid wouldn't be scared and not dare to come, would he? As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar figure appeared at the door. Seeing that familiar figure, Moon-young Baek became excited. Finally, we meet again. Hanjun Park came alone to the location specified by the other party. Seeing that the fish was about to take the bait, Moon-young Baek quickly waved to greet him. If you don't come up to the rooftop, Donghyun Kim's leg will be crippled. As soon as he finished speaking, a dense crowd of people surrounded him. One of the men waved his hand, signaling everyone to wait. Let me go first. Hanjun Park, I've been admiring you for a long time. Please fight with me first. I'm Choi from Gaotian Middle School. With a thud, before the man could finish speaking, he was punched in the face by Hanjun Park. Hanjun Park perfectly demonstrated what it meant to be a war god. At this moment, he just wanted to quickly rush to the rooftop to save people. But the group of people in front of him wouldn't let him pass easily. To block Hanjun Park from rushing to the rooftop, they directly used their bodies to block his path. This was undoubtedly like eggs hitting a stone, a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The gap between them was something that could never be bridged in their lifetime. Using only 2 rounds, he made them all lie down and rest. Seeing this, Moon-young Baek became even more excited. After 2 years, he was still that strong. He turned around and mocked Moon-gil Lee. It seems your so-called elite team is nothing more than this. They can't even consume Hanjun Park's stamina. Moon-gil Lee indicated that those guys standing at the front were the most useless rookies. After all, opportunities to be beaten by a monster like Hanjun Park were rare. This was a rare chance to train them. Don't worry, the good show is yet to come. Soon, Hanjun Park reached the bottom floor, when he wanted to continue to the 2nd floor. 2 people wearing black belt taekwondo uniforms blocked his path. So you're the famous Hanjun Park, are you thinking why there are only 2 of us? But today, if you want to pass through here, you must knock us down. Hanjun Park didn't want to waste time with these 2 punks. He swung his fist, wanting to end this quickly. Unexpectedly, his attack was dodged by the opponent with a sidestep. At this time, number 01 even praised Hanjun Park's fist for being quite hard. Then he grabbed Hanjun Park's wrist. He used his waist and back to lift Hanjun Park's entire body. Hanjun Park took a hard over-the-shoulder throw. Number 01 grabbed Hanjun Park's collar and lifted him up. Even if you're Hanjun Park, you can't look down on people like this. After saying this, he threw Hanjun Park away again. Although I don't know what you were like before, but rumors are often exaggerated. With your current level, you better not dream of defeating Nexus. To deal with someone like you, there's no need for Nexus leaders to attack directly. Facing the mockery, Hanjun Park paid no attention and charged up again after adjusting his state. At this time, Number 02 also made his move, choosing to face Hanjun Park head-on. Number 02 first bent down to dodge Hanjun Park's heavy punch. Then his two hands locked Hanjun Park's arm and head respectively. At this moment, both Number 01 and Number 02 attacked simultaneously, because they knew this person absolutely could not be underestimated. Number 01 quickly moved to lock Hanjun Park's neck. The two worked with clear division of labor, quickly locking down Hanjun Park's neck and arms. Hanjun Park was tightly locked by the two, unable to exert force. In just over 10 seconds, he was locked with veins bulging on his face, unable to breathe. But he knew he absolutely could not fall here. He gritted his teeth, put all his strength into his only movable thigh. He fell backward at the speed of a 100-meter sprint. Number 01 was heavily slammed against the wall. But Number 01, who had received professional training, wasn't so easy to shake off. He still tightly locked Hanjun Park's neck. No matter how much Hanjun Park slammed him against the wall, he remained unmoved. The two stuck to him like adhesive plaster. This was the terrifying aspect of a black belt 9th Dan. The move Number 01 used was called the lion-killing choke. As the name suggests, this was a technique that could allow humans to kill a lion with bare hands. With Number 01's lion-killing choke plus Number 02's crosslock, it was basically impossible for a person to break free. But they forgot that the man in front of them was known as a monster. Hanjun Park suddenly charged face-first toward the wall. He forcefully smashed his forehead along with Number 01's head hard against the wall. Number 01's forehead was immediately smashed and bleeding profusely. Number 01 cursed in his heart. What a madman. Killing 1,000 enemies but losing 800 of his own? Let's see how long you can last. Then Hanjun Park continued to slam Number 01 against the wall with crazy output. Number 02 sensed something was wrong, and quickly reminded Number 01 not to let go. Number 01 said, "You don't need to remind me. I know. If we let him break free, we're both finished. This kid's pupils are starting to dilate. Hold on a little longer." Saying this, he locked Hanjun Park's neck even tighter. With a bang, Hanjun Park violently hit the wall again. This impact hurt both of them to the bone. But even so, Number 01 still refused to let go. Number 02 also used all his strength to lock Hanjun Park's arm, not letting him break free. "Give up, Hanjun Park. You can't possibly break free from our combination lock technique." As soon as he finished speaking, Hanjun Park directly smashed toward the forehead this time. Number 01 could no longer withstand this fierce attack. He spat blood and loosened his hands, falling backward. Even as he lost consciousness, he couldn't understand what kind of ridiculous fighting power this was. This operation stunned Number 02 on the side. But next it was his turn. Hanjun Park lifted Number 02 high with one hand, then swung hard and smashed Number 02 heavily to the ground. With just one move, he knocked Number 02 unconscious. Before this, they didn't believe Moon-gil Lee's words. At that time, Moon-gil Lee said you simply cannot defeat him. But the two, as Black Belt 9th Dan Masters, had absolute confidence. The two retorted, "You're being too absolute, boss. Don't you know what kind of training we've received?" Moon-gil Lee helplessly explained, "Maybe you think you can defeat him at first, but as the fight goes on, you'll understand why I say this." Number 01 said, "Since you don't trust us, why make us face him?" "It's not that I don't trust you. If we're talking about one-on-one combat, no one here can beat Hanjun Park. So this is when we need to use your excellent skills. As long as we slowly drain his stamina, no matter how strong he is, he'll eventually fall. When you've drained his stamina to about the same level, then it's time for the person with the fastest punching speed among us to appear." Number 0 was Moon-gil Lee's strongest fighter. Moon-gil Lee's task for Number 0 this time was to continue draining Hanjun Park's stamina. Hanjun Park now thinks Dong-hyun Kim is in our hands. He must be very anxious. Once a person becomes anxious, they'll show openings, meaning his movements will become large and he'll be eager to attack. You just need to dodge his attacks and continuously drain his stamina. Number 0 looked unconvinced. "Do you want me to dodge his attacks like a mouse?" Moon-gil Lee said seriously, "You must do this, because your opponent this time is a monster. Don't dream of beating him. This is an order." But Moon-gil Lee was absolutely right. The current Hanjun Park was desperate to save someone. He kept punching and attacking Number 0, wanting to quickly knock down Number 0 and then go to the rooftop to save people. Due to his large movements, his attacks could be easily dodged by Number 0, this kind of punching pattern that could be seen through at a glance. "You could punch until next lifetime and still not touch me. Is this all you've got, Hanjun Park?" On the other side, Dong-hyun Kim wasn't sitting idle either. He was rushing to Hanjun Park's location with So-yeon Choi. Suddenly, So-yeon Choi made a drift turn and stopped the car. Dong Hyun Kim complained, "What kind of driving is this? Do you even have a license?" When he looked up, he was startled. A group of fierce-looking people were staring straight at them. Then a figure walked out from the darkness. "The people who hacked into your phones have all been dealt with. You must also know Hanjun Park's exact location. Hurry up and go to his side." It turned out that Insunam had also joined Junwoo Oh's camp. After saying this, the two groups headed toward Hanjun Park's direction to support. Dong Hyun Kim silently prayed that Hanjun Park wouldn't get into trouble. "Hold on a little longer, I'm coming right away." At this time, Hanjun Park was still fiercely attacking Number Zero. But without exception, each of his punches could be dodged by Number Zero, as if Number Zero had already figured out his attack patterns. Thinking about how he could only dodge around like a mouse, he felt frustrated. Then Number Zero couldn't care about so much and backhanded a punch to Hanjun Park. Number Zero didn't understand why the boss and others had to hype up this man so much. His attack methods were clearly so easy to see through, and his fighting had no technique at all. He'd been practicing boxing since he was 10 years old. Whether in punching speed or fighting technique, he surpassed the man in front of him. Why did the boss think he couldn't beat him? The more Number Zero thought about it, the angrier he became. He wanted to prove to the boss that he could defeat Hanjun Park. So he forgot Moon-gil Lee's instructions, and began to actively attack Hanjun Park. Soon Hanjun Park was beaten into retreat. Number Zero began to get cocky, dealing with trash like you, I'm enough. Taking advantage of his cockiness, Hanjun Park pressed him against the wall corner. It turned out he wanted to force Number Zero into the corner to limit Number Zero's movement. But Number Zero seemed to completely ignore this tactic. Number Zero dodged Hanjun Park's heavy punch and crouched down to his abdomen. He lightly placed his fist against Hanjun Park's abdomen. With a whoosh, the moment Number Zero exerted force, Hanjun Park was sent flying. How does this move feel? This is the inch punch that a fighting master taught me. What are you going to use to block it? The power of this move seemed really great. Hanjun Park was knocked back several meters and couldn't stop. Just as Number Zero was marveling at the power of this move, Hanjun Park charged up again. "It seems you really are thick-skinned." Nothing happened even after that. "Then take another punch from me." Hanjun Park was knocked back by the inch punch again. You being able to withstand two moves really surprised me. But Hanjun Park was still like nothing happened, charging up with full energy. Number Zero didn't believe this. "I want to see how long you can last." His fist struck Hanjun Park's abdomen. Every punch Number Zero used all his strength. Just as he was enjoying the beating, Hanjun Park suddenly grabbed his wrist. Number Zero instantly felt intense killing intent. "Why do you talk so much nonsense? Didn't your boss teach you not to underestimate your opponent?" At this time, a small thug quickly reported to the boss that Hanjun Park had broken through the second floor. Although Moon-gil Lee had guessed that Hanjun Park breaking through the second floor was inevitable, he didn't expect it to be so fast. But whatever, having lasted until now, he must be injured. With his current condition challenging the third and fourth floors, even if he's a monster, he can't handle it. Just as Moon-gil Lee was immersed in beautiful fantasies, his subordinate's voice came again. "This is bad, boss. Hanjun Park has already broken through the third floor. Our people simply can't stop him. He's really like a monster." These words made Moon-gil Lee's pupils dilate. But Moon Young-baek beside him was still laughing. "Why am I so happy that Hanjun Park won? I can't wait to see you, Hanjun Park." Moon-gil Lee saw Moon Young-baek being so arrogant and reminded him, "Don't you understand the situation yet?" Moon Young-baek directly retorted, "You're the one who doesn't understand the situation. Just because you can't handle him doesn't mean I can't. You're just making up numbers. Just watch obediently how I take down Hanjun Park." While the two were bickering, news came that Hanjun Park had reached the fourth floor. Because Number Zero on the second floor was too careless, he didn't drain much of Hanjun Park's stamina. The blockers on the third and fourth floors weren't in the same league as Hanjun Park. Although there were many people, none could last 3 rounds in his hands. The elites on the first and second floors could barely exchange a few moves with Hanjun Park. The people after that didn't even have the qualification to drain Hanjun Park's stamina. Fighting them was pure dimensional crushing. Soon, Hanjun Park solved all the people on the fourth floor. He walked toward the rooftop with heavy steps. When Hanjun Park reached the rooftop, everyone was waiting for him with weapons. "Long time no see, Hanjun Park. I didn't expect we'd meet again in this way." Hanjun Park didn't bother with small talk and asked with killing intent where Dong Hyun Kim was. Speaking of this, Moon Young-baek couldn't suppress his excited laughter. "Don't you understand the situation yet? Dong Hyun Kim was never here from the beginning. You've been fooled by my old-fashioned plan again. You're really stupid." Hanjun Park instantly realized he'd been tricked, but it was too late to say anything. A net fell from the sky and trapped him. Then the thugs ambushed on the rooftop swarmed over, targeting Hanjun Park with all kinds of punches and kicks. He was trapped in the net with no way to fight back. Just as Moon Young-baek was feeling smug, suddenly rumbling sounds came from downstairs. When he turned around, he was completely stunned. Dozens of motorcycles were speeding over. It turned out Dong Hyun Kim had brought people over. At this time, a large group of people blocked the entrance trying to stop them. But Seo Yun Choi had no intention of slowing down. Suddenly she braked hard. The entire car flew up. Dong Hyun Kim was directly thrown onto their faces, letting them have an intimate encounter with his knee. Just as Dong Hyun Kim was preparing for a big fight, a motorcycle suddenly rushed out. Dong Hyun Kim, you just keep going forward. We're enough here, hurry and find Hanjun Park, don't keep him waiting too long, then I'll leave it to you. After saying this, Dong Hyun Kim went full throttle charging toward the rooftop. The atmosphere of brotherhood directly ignited the entire scene. Insu Nam cleared the way for Dong Hyun Kim with motorcycles, so he could reach the rooftop as quickly as possible. Although the other side had superior numbers, Insu Nam's motorcycle corps wasn't to be trifled with either. Both sides engaged in fierce struggle. Soon everyone carved out a bloody path for Dong Hyun Kim, just as they were about to reach the building. A flying kick suddenly attacked Insu Nam. Insu Nam was shocked by the sudden kick, making both his hands numb. I didn't expect to meet you, this traitor here. Long time no see, Insu Nam. Dong Hyun Kim, seeing this, also returned a kick to Moon Gil Lee. However, Moon Gil Lee had no intention of fighting with him. You should go directly to save Hanjun Park, after all, we have no reason to fight. I just want to properly teach this runaway dog a lesson. Hearing this, Insu Nam slowly took off his jacket. Go on up, Dong Hyun Kim, I'll handle this guy. Dong Hyun Kim knew the situation was urgent and could only leave it to Insu Nam to handle. Moon Gil Lee had been holding back anger because of Moon Young Baek. Then the two started fighting without saying a word. Moon Young Baek on the rooftop saw the situation was unfavorable. He quickly ordered his subordinates to quickly end the battle here. Hearing this, the lackeys used all their skills to beat Hanjun Park. Hanjun Park, whose anger was maxed out, was about to break free from his restraints. Moon Young Baek quickly grabbed the iron rod from his lackey's hand. You idiots, if you're going to do it thoroughly. Just as the iron rod was about to strike down, Hanjun Park broke free from his restraints. As the iron rod struck toward Hanjun Park, Moon Young Baek also took a punch from Hanjun Park. The two exchanged health. The other lackeys quickly rushed up again to pin down Hanjun Park. Moon Young Baek was enraged by the punch. He pulled out a screwdriver wanting to kill Hanjun Park. With a bang, at this time Dong Hyun Kim finally arrived. Hanjun Park, what's wrong with you? Now you can't even handle a bunch of small fry? Hanjun Park's mouth curved slightly. Wasn't it to play with them before you came? Didn't I have to leave a few people for you to have fun beating? Moon Young Baek, who had been kicked to the ground, staggered to his feet. You two damn bugs dare to look down on me. I'm going to destroy you two bugs. After tying the rope to his hand, Moon Young Baek lunged at the two. He grabbed Dong Hyun Kim, then brought Dong Hyun Kim along with himself, jumping off the building, because the rope was tied above. Moon Young Baek didn't need to worry about falling, but Dong Hyun Kim's situation became very dangerous. Moon Young Baek aimed at Dong Hyun Kim's face and kicked frantically. You waste, hurry up and go to hell. Fortunately, Dong Hyun Kim had a quick wit. He pushed hard against the wall. The two were swung backwards several meters by inertia. Finally, Moon Young Baek's face was heavily smashed against the wall, while Dong Hyun Kim used the inertia to swing himself to the window below. He used this method to successfully escape danger. Moon Young Baek, hanging outside the window, wasn't so lucky. He felt himself being pulled up bit by bit. In a short while, he was pulled up. Moon Young Baek thought he was saved. But the next second, he was so scared his eyeballs almost fell out. It turned out the person pulling him up was none other than Hanjun Park. The good show is just beginning now, you little punk. Moon Young Baek knew being pulled back would definitely not end well, so he struggled desperately. But how could he possibly compare to Hanjun Park in strength? Hanjun Park pulled slightly and he was yanked over. Before he could land, he first took a heavy punch from Hanjun Park. He was first sent flying several meters, then forcefully dragged back and then punched away again. Moon Young Baek was like a yo-yo toy in his hands. Just as the third punch was about to land on Moon Young Baek's face, someone stopped him. Only then did Hanjun Park stop his fist. It turned out Dong Hyun Kim had come up from downstairs. I know you're very angry now, but could you let me have him first? I still have a score to settle with him. Hanjun Park naturally couldn't refuse. He turned and handed Moon Young Baek over to him. Recalling the humiliation of his broken leg 2 years ago, Dong Hyun Kim's face instantly darkened. Weren't you very loud? Get up and spar with me. Dong Hyun Kim's provocation completely enraged Moon Young Baek. Even a small fry like you dares to provoke me so arrogantly? 2 years ago I could subdue you, now I can subdue you the same way. Moon Young Baek intended to land an uppercut for a decisive victory, but Dong Hyun Kim dodged with a bend. Dong Hyun Kim's counterattack officially began. He landed a left hook right on Moon Young Baek's face. I'm really sick of hearing your dirty words. Do you have any idea in your heart why you could knock me down 2 years ago? Using that dirty method to beat me, can that be called winning? That can only be called despicable, you shameless guy. Speaking of this, Hanjun Park suddenly rushed up and added another punch. Dong Hyun Kim complained, What are you doing, Hanjun Park? I haven't had enough fun yet. Sorry, this guy is really infuriating, I couldn't help but strike. Dong Hyun Kim was both angry and amused. Since you can't hold back, then let's split him half and half. Moon Young-baek saw the situation was bad and wanted to quickly beg for mercy. Before the words of mercy could come out, fists were already landing on his face. Moon Young-baek was beaten beyond recognition under the front and back attacks of the two. At this time, Moon Young-baek suddenly grabbed Dong-hyun Kim's foot. Dong-hyun Kim thought he still wanted to stand up and fight back, but unexpectedly he knelt down to beg for mercy. "I lost, please spare me. I'll never be arrogant again. I'll definitely keep my head down from now on." Seeing Moon Young-baek trembling and begging for mercy, the two slowly stopped. At this time, Hanjun Park turned and walked away, but he went to pick up an iron rod. "If a few words could solve this, I wouldn't have started to fight at all." Dong-hyun Kim understood Hanjun Park's meaning. He took the iron rod and slowly walked toward Moon Young-baek. No matter how much Moon Young-baek begged for mercy, he remained unmoved. He raised the iron rod high and swung it down at Moon Young-baek. With a clang, Moon Young-baek was scared to tears. When he opened his eyes again, he found the iron rod hadn't hit his leg, but it hit the ground. At this time, he had already been scared into wetting himself. "Forget it, that's enough. I don't want to become like him." At this time, the sound of breaking bones reached Dong-hyun Kim's ears. It turned out Hanjun Park didn't intend to let Moon Young-baek off just like that. He picked up the iron rod and smashed it on Moon Young-baek's leg. Now, Moon Young-baek also experienced the kind of heart-wrenching pain Dong-hyun Kim felt at that time. Seeing this scene, Dong-hyun Kim just said lightly, "Really crazy." Then they hung Moon Young-baek outside the wall. Moon Gil-lee saw that Moon Young-baek had been defeated and stopped fighting. "That's enough. There's no need to continue fighting. We'll meet again soon." Since Moon Gil-lee said this, In Soo-nam also stopped, then called his brothers to disperse. The sun slowly rose. The two stood on the rooftop leisurely enjoying the breeze. Dong-hyun Kim asked, "Since we've dealt with Moon Young-baek, who's next?" After a moment, Hanjun Park finally spoke those words. "The next target is Cheon-soo Kim." In the following days, Hanjun Park seized control of Dongshan High School, and shortly after, So-yeon Choi received news that In Soo-nam and Dong-hyun Kim had taken over other schools as well. However, these developments didn't catch Junwoo-oh's attention, as what truly concerned him now was Nexus's real underlying purpose. Sure enough, before long, a mobile game called the Pascal became explosively popular within a week, and the company's stock price soared 6 times over. The spokesperson for this game was none other than Nexus's Cheon-soo Kim. At the same time, Cheon-soo Kim also received news that several schools had been taken over by Hanjun Park. Considering the billions in value this game would generate after a week, Cheon-soo Kim still demanded that Moon Gil-lee handle Hanjun Park's attacks with discretion. Meanwhile, Hanjun Park showed no signs of stopping. Under So-yeon Choi's arrangement, Dong-hyun Kim's next target was to take down Baekhyun Choi from Dongtaek High. After reviewing the files, the meticulous Dong-hyun Kim immediately noticed some secrets within, so under his persistent questioning, So-yeon Choi drove him to a dock. Under the glow of the setting sun, So-yeon Choi began to share her past. It turned out that So-yeon Choi was born into an unfortunate family. When she was very young, her father left home with another woman, while her mother worked day and night to make ends meet. Most of the time, it was just her and her younger brother taking care of each other at home. Without proper supervision, So-yeon Choi and her brother naturally fell into bad habits. So-yeon Choi became known for her reckless audacity and unrestrained behavior, and joined the Nexus organization. During this period, her homeroom teacher never gave up on her. Time and again, the teacher tried to guide her back to the right path in life, leaving a trace of innocence and goodness in her young heart. Until one day, when 2 weaklings failed to collect enough protection money, a punk actually pulled out his thing from his crotch and poured stinking urine over their heads. So-yeon Choi, who was present, couldn't stand watching this, so she used a helmet to teach this punk a lesson. Little did she know, her actions angered other punks, who all wanted to correct So-yeon Choi's worldview. Just as the beaten punk was about to strike again, a baseball bat suddenly flew out, hitting him directly in the face. Before the punk could react, a man rushed over and gave the beaten punk a thorough beating. Only then did So-yeon Choi see clearly that the person was her younger brother, Baekhyun Choi. At that moment, after dealing with this group of punks, Baekhyun Choi's first words were, "I'm the new chief of this area." This was something So-yeon Choi had never expected. Because Baekhyun Choi came from an ordinary family, he had been well-behaved and sensible since childhood, never causing trouble. But this became the reason he was bullied at school, and his sister was often used by bullies for their sick fantasies and humiliation. Finally, on this day, long-suppressed emotions made him snap. With just one bite, he tore off the bully's nose. Looking at the fear in the other's eyes, Baekhyun Choi finally understood that only by becoming strong could he live with dignity. So he went further and further down the path of becoming stronger, until he became someone everyone feared. But life is unpredictable. One day, Baekhyun Choi was cornered by dozens of people in an alley. Believing in the law of the strongest, Baekhyun Choi was determined to fight to the death. However, 2 fists were no match for many hands. Just when Baekhyun Choi's life was about to end, a silver-haired man stepped forward and saved him from the desperate situation. At that moment, he witnessed what true absolute strength meant. Thus, Baekhyun Choi became an unwavering follower of Kim Cheon-soo. Later, as the head of the Gangdong branch, Baekhyun Choi became even more ruthless. If he was slightly dissatisfied with his subordinates, his attacks would either draw blood or cause disability. In managing the Gangdong area, those who didn't obey him faced not only physical threats, but also had their homes vandalized, especially when he discovered that the students in the Gangdong area were hard to control. Because teachers were interfering, teachers became his main targets for revenge. This caused teachers to either transfer schools or resign, but among them were also some upright people. So-yeon Choi's homeroom teacher was one of them. However, this upright teacher suddenly had a car accident for no apparent reason, and was about to die on the street. Fortunately, the hospital managed to save his life. Witnessing all this, So-hyun Choi finally understood that Nexus wasn't a paradise for young people to have fun, but rather a tool for certain people to commit evil deeds. So she resolutely left the Nexus organization, and was determined to become someone who would bring down the organization. Now, after hearing So-hyun Choi's story, Dong-hyun Kim promised he would properly educate her brother. The next day, Hanjun Park was the first to bring good news. Toyota High School had been taken down. This was immediately followed by Insu-nam. Gwaryong High School was also taken down. However, Dong-hyun Kim, standing in the Gangdong branch, had gained nothing. The place was completely empty. It turned out that Baekhyun Choi had already moved all his people to a different gathering point. And during this time, he had also exploited So-hyun Choi's kind weakness, to kidnap her. The mastermind behind all this was Moon-gil Lee. His purpose was singular, to complete the task assigned by Cheon-soo Kim and buy time. Meanwhile, the equally cunning Junwoo was no fool either. He had already seen through Cheon-soo Kim's purpose clearly. Nexus's retreat and avoidance was simply to extract large amounts of funds through the stock market. After a week, the funds would be so massive that even Junwoo couldn't match them. At that point, no one would be able to shake the Nexus organization. However, all of this was insignificant in front of Junwoo, who had made his fortune through the stock market. Nexus's destruction was inevitable. At this time, the kidnapped So-hyun Choi tried her best to persuade her brother. But Baekhyun Choi remained unmoved. Loyal devotion to Cheon-soo Kim was his life creed. Left with no choice, So-hyun Choi could only use her personal tracking device to send her location to Junwoo. In no time, Dong-hyun Kim and Hanjun Park arrived at Baekhyun Choi's new stronghold. Under Hanjun Park's cover, Dong-hyun Kim fought his way through, almost reaching the top floor of Baekhyun Choi's new stronghold. At this moment, Baekhyun Choi, who had received the news, was told by So-hyun Choi that it was the tracker on her that had exposed their location. Upon hearing this, Baekhyun Choi flew into a rage and took So-hyun Choi hostage. Dong-hyun Kim, arriving at the top floor and seeing this scene, was speechless about these siblings. Just as both sides were in a standoff, So-hyun Choi suddenly executed a back throw, directly slamming Baekhyun Choi to the ground. Before Baekhyun Choi could get up, Dong-hyun Kim, seizing the opportunity, quickly followed up with a kick. This kick obviously didn't use full force. Baekhyun Choi only stepped back a few paces before steadying himself. Thinking about So-hyun Choi's fighting skills just now, and how she had been captured so easily before, Baekhyun Choi realized this was all part of their plan. So Baekhyun Choi went all in, grabbing a nearby glass window and smashing it over. Dong-hyun Kim immediately raised his hands to block, while being surprised that this kid fought so dishonorably, rivaling his own tactics. At this moment, Baekhyun Choi seized the opportunity and threw another punch. Dong-hyun Kim raised his hands to block again, but this time his arm felt a sharp pain. It turned out Baekhyun Choi was wearing brass knuckles on his hands. The continuous despicable tactics made Dong-hyun Kim start cursing Cheon-soo Kim, saying he had taught Baekhyun Choi to be even more shameless than himself. Hearing his idol being insulted, Baekhyun Choi immediately flew into a rage. But how could he be a match for Dong-hyun Kim? His next few attacks were all mercilessly countered by Dong-hyun Kim. After several rounds, Baekhyun Choi was beaten to his knees, unable to move. Feeling that Baekhyun Choi's arrogance had been sufficiently dampened, Dong-hyun Kim immediately switched to educational persuasion mode. Unfortunately, Cheon-soo Kim had already become out of reach in Baekhyun Choi's heart, an existence that no one could shake. So Baekhyun Choi became despicable and shameless again, raising his hand to sneak attack Dong-hyun Kim. However, this level of attack only earned him another kick from Dong-hyun Kim in return. Seeing her brother about to be beaten again, So-hyun Choi grabbed Dong-hyun Kim's arm. Thinking about her brothers and her own unfortunate childhood experiences, So-hyun Choi stepped forward and slapped her brother. With tears in her beautiful eyes, So-hyun Choi promised Baekhyun Choi that she would take good care of him from now on and never let him feel lonely and helpless again. At this point, Baekhyun Choi's heart began to waver. But thinking about all his past experiences, Baekhyun Choi still couldn't let go. Now, with one person he couldn't beat and another he couldn't hit, he could only choose to escape by jumping out the window. Meanwhile, with 30 minutes left before the stock market closed, Cheon-soo Kim's team was gleefully reviewing the stock's decline over the past 2 days. Just as they were happily about to arrange for their subordinates to rest, Pascal's stock suddenly fluctuated, and then began to surge. It turned out that Junwoo's team was now aggressively purchasing Pascal's stock. Even though the media continuously released negative news, this stock still managed to hit the daily limit before market close. Ultimately, Nexus's scheme to make money by shorting Pascal's stock turned into bubbles. At this moment, Cheon-soo Kim, as the head of Nexus, was desperately suppressing his anger. Just then, Baekhyun Choi suddenly burst in. Despite everyone's attempts to stop him, he kept chattering, insisting on knowing Cheon-soo Kim's next plan. However, the furious Cheon-soo Kim could no longer contain himself, and unleashed a barrage of punches and kicks on the approaching Baekhyun Choi. In his mind, people who had lost their value were no different from trash. At this moment, could Baekhyun Choi, lying on the ground, understand that the so-called out of reach only shines for you when you have value? Next, Cheon-soo Kim also made up his mind to launch a full-scale decisive battle. The next day, Nexus's final elite forces all assembled. They had only one purpose: to take down Hanjun Park. As the head of Nexus, Cheon-soo Kim naturally gave a passionate and stirring speech. Just as the atmosphere in the venue was reaching its peak, a luxury car suddenly crashed through the door. Amid the crowd's screams, the luxury car performed a beautiful drift and stopped in front of Cheon-soo Kim. Then, led by Junwoo, Hanjun Park and others emerged from the car. Looking at the vast crowd of Nexus members, Junwoo first made a strategic retreat, challenging Cheon-soo Kim to a 3-on-3 battle, with the loser permanently withdrawing from the conflict. With his confident psychology of certain victory, Cheon-soo Kim accepted the challenge, and added a condition that the winner would have the right to dispose of Hanjun Park. Next, from Junwoo's side, In-soo Nam was the first to enter the ring. From Cheon-soo Kim's side, the one who entered was known as the Fighting Bull from Gangwon, Ji-hyuk Kim. It was said that 3 generations of Ji-hyuk Kim's family had been called the strongest wrestlers, and there were rumors that Ji-hyuk Kim had once uprooted an ancient tree in the village with his bare hands. In comparison, In-soo Nam now seemed like a weakling. But could a weakling really not defeat a bull? In-soo Nam struck first, opening with a series of jabs. His agility was completely different from before, with every punch landing solidly on Ji-hyuk Kim's body. Although it only caused superficial injuries, it made the initially overconfident Ji-hyuk Kim become more cautious. So, to everyone's surprise, Ji-hyuk Kim, who had trained in wrestling, took off his shoes at the beginning. This meant that in the upcoming fight, he would use his full strength. Just as In-soo Nam was preparing to switch between offense and defense, his body was directly grabbed around the waist by the charging Ji-hyuk Kim. Before In-soo Nam could react, Ji-hyuk Kim immediately executed an inside leg trip, instantly throwing In-soo Nam to the ground. At this moment, In-soo Nam only felt his vision go black and nearly passed out. He gritted his teeth and endured, but this wasn't over yet. The first throw completed, Ji-hyuk Kim showed no intention of letting go, instead turning around to lift In-soo Nam for a back suplex. This throw directly scrambled In-soo Nam's internal organs. However, the determined In-soo Nam managed to withstand these 2 throws and kicked Ji-hyuk Kim, who was still trying to continue grappling. Using the rebound force from the kick, In-soo Nam retreated several meters, immediately creating distance between them. Having gained the advantage, Ji-hyuk Kim wasn't about to stop there. He gathered strength in his legs and charged again. Just as Ji-hyuk Kim was about to attempt another throw, a large hand suddenly blocked his vision. This unexpected move from In-soo Nam caught Ji-hyuk Kim off guard, and in his confusion he lost his sense of distance. As a result, both his hands swung at empty air. In-soo Nam seized the opportunity and once again launched into wild punching mode. But this level of damage was completely ineffective against the thick-skinned Ji-hyuk Kim, only making him more irritated. Sure enough, the furious Ji-hyuk Kim charged at In-soo Nam again. In-soo Nam used the same trick again, throwing a punch directly at the charging Ji-hyuk Kim. In-soo Nam's punch force combined with Ji-hyuk Kim's charging momentum made Ji-hyuk Kim immediately stop in his tracks, with blood streaming from his nose. However, in just a moment, the thick-skinned Ji-hyuk Kim recovered his fighting ability. Seeing his attacks were ineffective, In-soo Nam immediately switched from defense to offense, raising his fists and charging forward. Having been tricked twice, Ji-hyuk Kim was confident he wouldn't fall for it again. Unfortunately, after just a few exchanges, In-soo Nam's large hand once again blocked his vision. Ji-hyuk Kim was immediately so angry he wanted to curse. But In-soo Nam wouldn't give him the chance, landing another series of wild punches on Ji-hyuk Kim's face. Using the eye-covering dirty trick 3 times in a row, while the damage wasn't great, the humiliation was extreme. Ji-hyuk Kim was now furious to the extreme, so he gathered strength again and charged at In-soo Nam. Just when the spectators thought In-soo Nam would use the same trick again, In-soo Nam suddenly raised his knee and heavily struck Ji-hyuk Kim in the face. It turned out that from the beginning of the fight until now, everything had been part of Junwoo's plan. Everything was just to enrage Ji-hyuk Kim and deliver that fatal blow. 2 days ago, Junwoo and In-soo Nam had analyzed the combat power. From weight to strength, the gap between In-soo Nam and Ji-hyuk Kim was too large. If he didn't use some tactics, Insunam's chances of winning were basically zero. Against a monster like Ji-hyuk Kim, who was built like a bull, the only hope for victory was to exploit Ji-hyuk Kim's own strengths and weaknesses. At this moment, seeing Ji-hyuk Kim about to fall backwards, Insunam's victory was in sight. But suddenly, Ji-hyuk Kim's hands tightly grabbed the leg that Insunam was using to knee strike, followed immediately by a backward throw. With this sudden turn of events, Insunam had no power to dodge. He could only be thrown to the ground head first, without any chance to catch his breath. Ji-hyuk Kim immediately pounced on him, unleashing a flurry of punches at Insunam. Just when the battle seemed about to end, Insunam suddenly grabbed dirt from the ground and threw it out. The rising dust cloud immediately made Ji-hyuk Kim stop his punches. Insunam used this opportunity to roll away and escape. In the blink of an eye, he once again distanced himself from Ji-hyuk Kim. And at this moment, Insunam, who had gotten back up from the ground, his eyes had begun to look hollow. It turned out that under Ji-hyuk Kim's relentless heavy strikes, Insunam's body and mind had reached the brink of collapse. The only reason he could still stand was due to his tenacious will and rich combat experience. But Ji-hyuk Kim on the other side didn't care about any of this. Enraged as he was, he now had only one thought: to take down Insunam. So he powered up his legs and charged out once again. What no one expected was that Insunam, who had seemed to be at the end of his rope, suddenly burst forth with astonishing fighting power. His punching strength and speed even exceeded what he had shown before, making every punch that landed on Ji-hyuk Kim able to cut skin and penetrate muscle and bone. Unfortunately, all of this was meaningless before absolute strength. During the duel, Ji-hyuk Kim spotted an opening, grabbed Insunam around the waist, and once again executed a backward throw. This time, Ji-hyuk Kim used his full brute force. The power was so great that both men were launched into the air. Just when Insunam seemed doomed, at this critical moment, Insunam actually raised his right elbow high. Using the force of Ji-hyuk Kim's throw, he aimed at Ji-hyuk Kim's face and smashed down. As the two fell, the massive impact sent dust flying everywhere. Only after the dust settled could the two men lying on the ground be distinguished. Insunam was heard slowly cursing, "Damn it, I near died," from his mouth, then shakily stood up, amid the shocked cries of the crowd. This duel with Ji-hyuk Kim ended with Insunam's hard-fought victory. At this time, Moon-gil Lee, who had been watching the battle, had long grown impatient. He walked into the dueling ground and threw a crushing punch at the exhausted Insunam. Insunam, hit by the crushing punch, was immediately sent flying several meters, disappearing into a cloud of dust. Faced with this red-haired man's dishonorable conduct, Dong-hyun Kim, who was also red-haired, immediately stepped forward. As Dong-hyun Kim entered the dueling ground, Moon-gil Lee even made a harsh declaration. Today, only one of the two redheads present could remain. The loser would have all his hair shaved off and would never again be allowed to participate in any Nexus conflicts. Before the battle begins, let's come to Moon-gil Lee's story. The Celestial Empire has inherited numerous martial arts schools since ancient times, but due to rulers wanting to maintain political stability and reduce threats to themselves, they gradually weakened the practical combat effectiveness and aggressiveness of martial arts through various systems, until martial arts became merely a type of dance technique with only performance value. But this doesn't mean that all schools' martial arts combat capabilities have completely disappeared. The family Moon-gil Lee belonged to was just such a school with real combat ability. It's just that this school had always kept a low profile, hidden in the mountains for thousands of years, with the school's secret manuals passed down through generations. But when it came to Moon-gil Lee's generation, unfortunately, his talent was insufficient to inherit the family's essence. With no other choice, the previous master, who was Moon-gil Lee's father, could only find a talented adopted son to carry on the tradition. However, as the family's only heir, Moon-gil Lee was naturally unwilling to accept this. So from that day on, Moon-gil Lee began training day and night, until several years later, when his kung fu had reached mastery. Moon-gil Lee immediately went to his father wanting to reclaim his inheritance. After gaining his father's consent, he had a match with his adopted brother. Unfortunately, in the face of talent, hard work can only determine the lower limit, but not the upper limit. In the end, Moon-gil Lee was defeated in just 2 rounds. After completely losing his right to inherit the master's position, Moon-gil Lee left home in anger. So in the city of bright lights and wine, Moon-gil Lee seemed to find a sense of belonging. All the injustices and unpleasant people he encountered could be resolved with his fists. Until one day he met another genius, Cheonsu Kim. The two only exchanged a few moves, and Moon-gil Lee knew he was no match. But Cheonsu Kim didn't act arrogantly because of his talent. Instead, like a hero recognizing another hero, he wanted to befriend Moon-gil Lee. So under the influence of Cheonsu Kim's personal charisma, Moon-gil Lee determined that this man was the one he should follow. Therefore, in this duel with Dong-hyun Kim, Moon-gil Lee had the determination to win. Because in his heart, Dong-hyun Kim was nothing more than trash. Only geniuses could stand above him. Sure enough, as the battle progressed, the situation was completely one-sided. Faced with Moon-gil Lee's various fighting techniques, Dong-hyun Kim was completely unable to defend. He could only clumsily make simple attacks. Just when everyone thought the outcome was decided and there was no suspense, Moon-gil Lee's leg, which he had been using for defense, was suddenly kicked and broken by Dong-yeon Kim. The pain of broken bones instantly reached Moon-gil Lee's brain. Moon-gil Lee could no longer execute his various technical moves. Dong-yeon Kim, seizing the opportunity, immediately began his counter-attack mode. It turned out this was all a trap set by Dong-yeon Kim, in a situation where his technique and ability were insufficient. Dong-yeon Kim deeply understood his own strengths and weaknesses. While continuously taking passive beatings, he could only use his powerful leg strength to repeatedly attack the same spot on his opponent. Until his opponent was severely injured, then he would have a chance to win. Now Dong-yeon Kim, using the opportunity he had risked his life to create, used both hands and feet to continuously attack Moon-gil Lee. And Moon-gil Lee, who came from a fighting family, was no ordinary person either. He was seen defending while channeling energy into his palms. With a loud shout, his palms came together and pushed forward. The massive impact immediately sent Dong-yeon Kim flying several meters. This palm strike also directly broke several of Dong-yeon Kim's ribs. However, at this point, Dong-yeon Kim would not easily surrender. After a brief adjustment, he began a new round of attacks. At this time, Moon-gil Lee, with his leg bone shattered, was hindered in movement. He could only switch to using his arms to defend against Dong-yeon Kim's kicks. As Dong-yeon Kim's attacks accumulated, with a crisp crack, Moon-gil Lee's arm also fractured. Intense pain once again shot through Moon-gil Lee's brain. At this point, Moon-gil Lee had lost the ability to execute various fighting techniques. So everything returned to its essence. The rest of their duel would no longer use any fighting techniques. Only the most primitive hand-to-hand combat remained. So it went, you punch me, I punch you. Every punch connecting with flesh, every punch using full strength, until both men were exhausted. At this moment, Cheon-soo Kim, who had been watching the battle, stepped forward first. He supported Moon-gil Lee, who was about to fall, helping him preserve his last bit of pride and dignity. At the same time, Hanjun Park also rushed forward first, catching Dong-yeon Kim, who was about to fall. Thus, the duel between Moon-gil Lee and Dong-yeon Kim ultimately ended in a draw. Next would be the life and death duel between Hanjun Park and Cheon-soo Kim, where everything was at stake. Next, let's come to Cheon-soo Kim's story. In K-country, when money and power go hand in hand, everything can override law and morality. This allows some sinful chaebols to easily escape legal punishment. And those poor people living at the bottom of society, upon learning of this news, usually just curse while continuing their laborious lives. But there will always be people in this world who are different. Facing the same circumstances, Cheon-soo Kim would always cast envious glances. At that moment, the gears of fate also accelerated their turning. Through his own efforts, Cheon-soo Kim became the #1 esports player in K-country. This was also thanks to Cheon-soo Kim's exceptional talent. His perception was different from ordinary people. He would have brief premonitions of everything that was about to happen. This ability was not only used in esports games, it was also handy when used in fighting. So more and more school thugs became his followers. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Nexus organization was naturally born. This also brought Cheon-soo Kim one step closer to reaching the pinnacle of money and power. However, just as that glittering door was about to open, Hanjun Park's appearance dimmed that dawn. So as an obstacle on the road to money and power, Cheon-soo Kim had to eliminate Hanjun Park today. And Hanjun Park, who had now staked everything, was also impatient to avenge the humiliation of these 2 years. He was seen taking the initiative, leading with fists and feet, but Cheon-soo Kim easily dodged with just a backflip. Then, before Hanjun Park could recover, Cheon-soo Kim landed an uppercut right on his jaw. Just as Hanjun Park, having taken the punch, gritted his teeth and was about to counterattack. Cheon-soo Kim followed up with a right hook to his face, but this wasn't over yet. His left hook immediately followed. In just one exchange, everyone present could see that Hanjun Park couldn't keep up with Cheon-soo Kim's rhythm at all. Sure enough, what followed was completely one-sided. Cheon-soo Kim began toying with Hanjun Park. Of course, Hanjun Park, with his thick health bar, wasn't a pushover either. Relying on his ability to take punishment, Hanjun Park, having recovered, continued his offensive output. But no matter how he attacked, Cheon-soo Kim could sense it in advance and give him precise counterattacks while dodging. After several rounds like this, Hanjun Park was already covered in wounds and kneeling on the ground. At this point, Cheon-soo Kim didn't forget to crush his spirit. His mouth never stopped taunting Hanjun Park. However, this man who had staked everything today, and carried all the hopes of his friends, how could he be easily defeated? Cheon-soo Kim's words not only failed to devastate Hanjun Park, but instead made the anger in his heart grow stronger and stronger. So much so that in an instant, his entire aura changed dramatically. Cheon-soo Kim, who was still taunting, seemed to also sense that killing intent from Hanjun Park. Just as he was puzzled, Hanjun Park let out a roar, and his entire body shot forward like an arrow released from a bow, charging straight at Cheon-soo Kim. Just as Cheon-soo Kim's expression changed from puzzlement to surprise, Hanjun Park had already kicked out. The speed was so fast that Chansu Kim had no power to resist. In panic, he could only raise his hands to block. Unfortunately, he was still a step too slow. As his hands were instantly kicked away, Hanjun Park's fist had already smashed into his chest, not giving Chansu Kim a chance to react. Hanjun Park immediately retracted his right foot, then his left foot was already greeting Chansu Kim's head. Seeing the situation, Chansu Kim quickly raised his arms to defend. But facing such speed and powerful force, he could only grit his teeth and take it hard. Only now did Chansu Kim understand that even though he possessed the ability to predict his opponent's moves, it was useless against Hanjun Park's high-speed attacks. At this point, Junwoo said that it turned out the gifted Hanjun Park had always held back when fighting. He had always tried to defeat his opponents without endangering their lives. If he had fought without restraint from the beginning, who knows how many souls would have fallen by his hands. At this point, Hanjun Park's father knew well the stakes involved. As the owner of a fighting gym, Hanjun Park's father never taught Hanjun Park any fighting techniques, and also turned away all the famous fighters who wanted to train Hanjun Park. Everything he did was to protect Hanjun Park, to prevent him from doing things he'd regret for life in his youthful recklessness. However, how could talent be easily suppressed? Having experienced large and small battles during this period, Hanjun Park's fighting skills had evolved infinitely. Now facing another genius, Chansu Kim, Hanjun Park with his restraints removed could be said to have met his match. This great battle was bound to be thoroughly satisfying. At this point, the battle between the two had begun to enter a white-hot stage. As Chansu Kim took more and more beatings, having never suffered such pain before, he began to become increasingly frenzied. Shedding his arrogance and cunning, he now had only one thought in his mind, and that was to defeat Hanjun Park. And Hanjun Park, freed from his restraints, was even more brutal with every punch hitting flesh, pushing his body's potential to the extreme. So the two were evenly matched, exchanging punches and kicks, and every strike aimed directly at the opponent's vital points. Just at this life-or-death moment, a man shouted loudly, stopping both of them. And the newcomer was none other than Lion Kim, the man in sunglasses who had been following Chansu Kim. Then, under his command, Chansu Kim disbanded the Nexus organization. This outcome was like a bolt from the blue, making everyone present unable to accept it, especially Junwoo, who had been living for revenge. No matter how much he pounded and cursed Chansu Kim, it was all in vain. Because in the eyes of Capital, all of this was just a game, and the person truly manipulating this game was Lion Kim, who had been following Chansu Kim all along. For Lion Kim, this game had reached a completely losing situation by now, and the duel between Hanjun Park and Chansu Kim was no longer important. Although they were fired up, Hanjun Park and Chansu Kim still felt unwilling in their hearts. But they could only choose to accept reality. As everything settled, everyone returned to their previous lives. But Junwoo never gave up his determination for revenge. Facing the many suspicious points about Nexus's disbandment, Junwoo believed there must be larger forces manipulating things behind the scenes. Sure enough, through Junwoo's careful investigation, a more massive force slowly surfaced. Seongsan Group was wealthy enough to rival the nation in K-country, and Lion Kim was one of the fourth-generation rich of Seongsan Group. This could explain why Nexus could manipulate the stock market, control gaming companies' stock prices, and possess sufficient financial resources to operate the Nexus organization. At the same time, this also foreshadowed that an even more massive and difficult battle was about to begin. That night, after drinking with friends, So-yeon Choi, reeking of alcohol, walked into the convenience store she frequented as usual. Her sexy figure and beautiful face immediately caught the attention of the clerk. But So-yeon Choi had never noticed this man behind the cash register. She just selected a cup of instant noodles as usual, preparing to pay. But during checkout, the man suddenly gave her a rice ball. This sudden kindness left So-yeon Choi at a loss. But out of politeness, So-yeon Choi still expressed her thanks. However, this simple word of thanks made the loser-like clerk's heart flutter. He immediately began confessing his feelings to So-yeon Choi. Just then, the massive figure of fried pork cutlets squeezed into the convenience store. And he kept complaining to So-yeon Choi about how long she'd been out, telling her to go back and continue drinking. However, when he saw the rice ball in front of So-yeon Choi, fried pork cutlet didn't care about anything and picked it up and stuffed it in his mouth, while still muttering complaints about So-yeon Choi. This massive figure, rough voice, and barbaric behavior immediately put the clerk on alert, leading him to imagine So-yeon Choi's tragic situation. It just so happened that, at this time, So-yeon Choi, having dealt with fried pork cutlet and wanting to avoid drinking, wanted to secretly leave through the back door. So after So-yeon Choi left, the clerk immediately challenged fried pork cutlet. At this moment, the clerk didn't look simple at all. His Muay Thai stance was quite proper. However, fried pork cutlet didn't take the chicken-like clerk seriously at all. But in the next exchange, fried pork cutlet fell at the clerk's feet. Seeing things were going badly, the fallen fried pork cutlet pulled out his phone to call for backup. At this time, In-soon Nam, who was grilling meat, immediately exploded when he got the call. But there was someone who exploded even faster than Insu Nam. At this moment, he'd already disappeared from sight, heading off to find fried pork cutlet. It turned out to be Dong Yun Kim. He was the first to arrive at the convenience store, giving the clerk a strike. And the clerk, who blocked Dong Yun Kim's punch, began fantasizing that Dong Yun Kim was the boss of a criminal organization, that he and fried pork cutlet were in cahoots, framing his goddess. So with a roar, the clerk unleashed his loving leg kick. Dong Yun Kim quickly kicked out to block. The moment their legs collided, both sides felt their opponent's considerable strength. So after retracting their legs, both immediately pulled back and began reassessing each other's strength. But when enemies meet on a narrow road, the brave one wins. The clerk chose to strike first. He was seen kicking out with great force again. Dong Yun Kim was quick with his eyes and body, dodging to the side. However, the electrical box behind him wasn't so lucky. It was directly kicked away by the clerk. Watching the electrical box fly away, Dong Yun Kim couldn't help but marvel at his opponent's leg power. Not giving Dong Yun Kim much time to think, the clerk threw another elbow strike. Dong Yun Kim quickly raised his hands to block, having failed to make effective hits twice in a row. The clerk didn't intend to stop and sent out another flying knee. At this point, Dong Yun Kim was no longer indulging him. He raised his leg and kicked right into the knee that was thrust out. This kick immediately made the clerk's anger meter explode, and Dong Yun Kim was also about to enter berserker mode. Just as the two were preparing to fight to the death, a loud shout stopped both of them. When they stopped and looked, they saw So Yun Choi walking over with a helpless expression. After So Yun Choi's explanation, the clerk finally realized it was all a misunderstanding. It turned out the clerk had always had a crush on So Yun Choi. Earlier, seeing fried pork cutlet's fierce appearance, he thought So Yun Choi was being controlled by a bad organization. So in order to rescue his beloved, he decided to play the hero and save the beauty. But due to his excessive fantasizing, he caused a misunderstanding. Finally, amid repeated apologies, the clerk saw off Dong Yun Kim's group, and also saw off his beloved. But at this moment, the gears of fate had already begun to turn. Due to the disbandment of the Nexus organization, schools across the nation were in chaos. Various new organizations and unknown masters were all beginning to stir. Facing the current complex situation, the fourth-generation rich of Seongsan Group also wanted to take this opportunity to make their mark, thereby establishing their power and status within the group. However, Lion Kim's poor showing made the eldest brother very dissatisfied, because he had the ambition to push Seongsan Group to the nation's peak, and the remaining two siblings, in order to distinguish themselves, were even more sarcastic and mocking toward Lion Kim. Finally, after some verbal sparring, the youngest sister was put in charge of restarting the school alliance, and so the chaebols began a new round of games. In the correctional facility, a man was slowly walking toward the exit. Today was his day of release. As the boss inside, the younger brothers still being held all came to see him off. Of course, there were also those who were unconvinced. Someone mocked him with a few words on the spot, and was directly grabbed through the bars by the man, while the escorting guards turned a blind eye. Thus the man completed his paperwork and smoothly walked out of the correctional facility. Breathing the free air, the man was planning his life, when a tattooed beauty loudly called out to him, "Jubin Yang, long time no see." Then came another beauty's greeting, and she was Sang Lim, one of the fourth-generation rich of Seongsan Group. After getting in the Bentley, Jubin Yang immediately received the task assigned by Sang Lim: eliminate Hanjun Park, establish an organization that could replace Nexus. And as payment, Jubin Yang would get everything he wanted. At this moment, having received the money, Jubin Yang's first priority was to find his childhood friend, Donghua Lee. Seeing his friend's currently difficult life, Jubin Yang's childhood memories immediately flashed through his mind. Back then, the two were young and ignorant during a theft. Donghua Lee was caught by the victim. To protect Jubin Yang, Donghua Lee took all the blame himself. As a result, during the victim's punishment, Donghua Lee's eye was kicked blind, and Jubin Yang, hiding nearby, witnessed the entire process. Afterward, Jubin Yang swore that Donghua Lee would be his only family. At this time, seeing Jubin Yang, Donghua Lee was also extremely excited. He immediately went up for a hug. After the two caught up, Jubin Yang threw Donghua Lee a large bag of money and told him to arrange for his family, then informed both of them of the next plan in action. The scene shifted to nighttime, where two men were desperately trying to escape Donghua Lee's pursuit. However, at a corner in an alley, the man running in front was knocked down with a single punch, and the one who struck was their former boss, Jubin Yang. The man behind originally still had the strength to escape, but faced with instinctive fear, he immediately went limp. Jubin Yang looked at this man who now held his former position as boss, his anger rising. Just as Jubin Yang was about to make this man pay, the man extended his own hand and used a stone to smash off his own finger. And this was merely to prove his unwavering loyalty. On the other side, Hanjun Park was still brooding over his duel with Cheon-soo Kim. And Junwoo told Hanjun Park, "We will find more ways to face this war, and you will surely win." At the same time, Cheonsu Kim was also doubting himself over that day's duel with Hanjun Park. And Lion Kim told Cheonsu Kim, "This time you have to win." At this moment, So-yeon Choi, who was looking at documents, suddenly discovered that the schools in the Gangseo district were increasingly trending toward unified management. And one of the leaders was actually that convenience store clerk. With questions, So-yeon Choi went to the convenience store she frequented again. At this time, the clerk was feeling down because he hadn't seen his goddess for a long time. So-yeon Choi's sudden appearance immediately energized this dejected man. "Jongyeon Chon, who exactly are you?" Under So-yeon Choi's questioning. No matter how the clerk explained, So-yeon Choi didn't believe what he said. Just then, an air conditioning unit was suddenly thrown into the convenience store. Looking through the shattered glass, a group of school thugs were arrogantly shouting outside. And they were the newly emerged organization from Gangseo District, Gangseo League. Now let's come to Jongyeon Chon's story. 8-limb boxing, also known as Muay Thai, mainly uses double fists, double legs, double elbows, double knees as attacking weapons. Its fighting style is fierce and hard. In the underground boxing world, it's been praised as invincible for 500 years. As a transfer student, Jongyeon Cheon had received systematic Muay Thai training abroad. His master was originally an employee of Jongyeon Cheon's family company, and taught him everything without reservation. So dealing with these school thugs was simply effortless. As for why he later got involved with these school thugs, it's a long story. It turned out that when Jongyeon Cheon first arrived in K-country, the school thugs began bullying him. At first, Jongyeon Cheon could endure it, but later the thugs became more and more excessive. So when he couldn't bear it anymore, Jongyeon Cheon gave them a thorough beating. However, this incident got distorted through word of mouth, and was gradually known by more and more thugs. So they all came to challenge Jongyeon Cheon, and without exception, they all fell to Jongyeon Cheon's 8-limb boxing. And the Gangseo League from earlier was one of these organizations. Looking at Jongyeon Cheon's loser-like appearance, So-yeon Choi began to slowly believe what he said, seeing his goddess beginning to be interested in him. Jongyeon Cheon prepared to deepen his goddess's impression to him. But suddenly, a synchronized loud cheer interrupted Jongyeon Cheon. It turned out to be the school thugs who had just been beaten down. At this moment, they were uniformly calling Jongyeon Cheon boss. This was clearly the rhythm of surrendering after being unable to win. Just as Jongyeon Cheon didn't know what to do, So-yeon Choi became deeply interested in this clerk, so she took out her phone and welcomed him to join Junwoo's team. For Jongyeon Cheon, this was the best opportunity to get close to his goddess. So with one having feelings and the other having righteousness, So-yeon Choi easily took over the Gangseo district. On the other side, Hanjun Park found his father. After years, he finally opened his mouth. "Dad, I want to improve my fighting power." At the moment when his father saw the look in Hanjun Park's eyes, he finally understood that his son's talent had reached the time for complete release. So after establishing 3 ground rules with Hanjun Park, he began teaching through both words and actions. At the same time, Dongyeon Kim was also troubled by his inability to improve his combat power. Thinking back to his previous battle with Moon-gil Lee where he barely managed to win, he would inevitably become the one holding Hanjun Park back in the future. Just then, So-yeon Choi appeared with Jongyeon Cheon. After understanding Dongyeon Kim's troubles, Jongyeon Cheon recommended his master to him. As the three arrived at the dock, So-yeon Choi realized that Jongyeon Cheon was a genuine rich second generation. The reason he lived like a loser was because he had a heart of self-reliance and independence. Suddenly, Dongyeon Kim felt someone touching his leg. While Dongyeon Kim was disgusted, Jongyeon Cheon shouted, "Master!" It turned out that the man on the ground touching legs was Jongyeon Cheon's master, Taesik Cha, a legendary figure of T-country's 8-limb boxing. At this moment, Taesik Cha, having finished touching the leg, was marveling at Dongyeon Kim's extraordinary bone structure, calling him a once-in-a-millennium martial arts prodigy. While Dongyeon Kim was bewildered by the scene before him, Taesik Cha actively extended his hand, inviting Dongyeon Kim to learn Muay Thai. The now awakened Dongyeon Kim quickly bowed to seek instruction. After nightfall, in a dimly lit room, Gyubin Yang was holding Insu Nam's files, examining them while reminiscing about the past. So the next day, Gyubin Yang found Sang Lim, clearly stating that he wanted him to eliminate Insu Nam first. Faced with Gyubin Yang's persistence, Sang Lim didn't offer much resistance. She considered this Gyubin Yang's warm-up before going to war with Hanjun Park. With the support secured, Gyubin Yang wasted no time, and immediately gathered a large number of thugs, launching an attack on Inshin, the area where Insu Nam was located. At this time, Donghua Lee, who had received the news, secretly notified another person, Geo Park, the 4th-generation heir of Seongsan Group. However, Geo Park seemed well prepared, as 3 National Reserve team members beside him were already eager to fight. They were Shot Put Man, Javelin Man, and Athletics Man. The scene returns to Gyubin Yang, facing his surprise attack. The thugs in Inshin were completely unable to resist. Only the fried pork cutlet guy could barely cope. But he knew this wasn't a long-term solution. So he shouted for his subordinates to quickly notify Insu Nam, who was outside. Just when Incheon was about to collapse, Insu Nam appeared on a motorcycle. Then the battlefield was left to Insu Nam and Gyubin Yang. Upon seeing Gyubin Yang, Insu Nam immediately apologized to him. Hearing Insu Nam's apology, Gyubin Yang became even more furious and increased the force of his punches. The scene shifts to Gyubin Yang's story. It turns out Gyubin Yang grew up in a family of scumbags, where family meant nothing but despair to him, until one day, after getting into trouble, he was taken in by Incheon, and finally felt what family meant, what warmth meant. However, human nature often cannot withstand the test of fate. In a theft incident, the falsely accused Gyubin Yang lashed out, beating the accuser until his head was bloody. It wasn't until the then leader of Incheon, Mansu Nam, appeared that he stopped the enraged Gyubin Yang. Just when Gyubin Yang thought he could clear his name, Mansu Nam slapped him across the face. When the slapped Gyubin Yang tried to explain, he was met with more punches from Mansu Nam. It turned out Mansu Nam didn't care about right or wrong, he cared about harmony among family members. Once family members started fighting, it proved you were no longer part of this family. So with resentment, Gyubin Yang resolutely left Incheon. After returning home, facing the malice of his real family, he became even colder, and eventually ended the last trace of kinship with his own hands. From then on, his only family was Donghua Li. However, Geo Park, who had received Donghua Li's message, had already planned everything and was leading people to the battlefield. Back to Insu Nam's scene. Insu Nam's left punch was suddenly entangled by a steel wire. As the other end of the rope was pulled tight by Gyubin Yang, Insu Nam's wrist immediately began bleeding. Facing Gyubin Yang's subsequent attacks, Insu Nam was completely unable to resist, and could only passively take the beating. Only then did he realize he was like trapped prey. The more he struggled, the more painful it became. But as they say, even a cornered beast will fight. Insu Nam grabbed the rope on his wrist with his other hand, and at the moment of punching, he pulled the rope hard toward himself. Gyubin Yang on the other end was directly pulled over. The alert Gyubin Yang also swung his fist, but his punch was caught mid-air by Insu Nam and gripped in his hand. Without giving Gyubin Yang a chance to struggle, Insu Nam immediately delivered a headbutt to his face. Instantly, Gyubin Yang's face was splattered with blood. The cursing Gyubin Yang wanted to create distance again to contain Insu Nam's attacks. But Insu Nam had already seen through his tactics. So when he tried to break out, Insu Nam kicked hard at one of Gyubin Yang's legs. This kick immediately brought Gyubin Yang to his knees. Without giving him a chance to get up, Insu Nam's left arm tightly clamped Gyubin Yang's head, and instantly delivered several elbow strikes and knee attacks. Seeing himself about to be brutally beaten with no solution, remembering the grievances he suffered in Incheon, Gyubin Yang began to get desperate. During the fight, he suddenly hugged Insu Nam's waist and rushed toward the bridge, wanting to die together. However, fate played tricks. At the critical moment, Insu Nam grabbed onto a bridge pier, and Gyubin Yang was also suspended in mid-air. The steel wire between them now became Gyubin Yang's only lifeline. He thought that in this life-or-death moment, Insu Nam would abandon him and choose self-preservation. But suddenly, a drop of blood fell on Gyubin Yang's face. Looking up, he saw Insu Nam using all his strength to pull the rope up, his hands already torn and bloody from the rope. Surprised by Insu Nam's actions, Gyubin Yang still didn't appreciate the kindness, yelling for Insu Nam to let go. But Insu Nam continued to repay evil with kindness, showing no intention of letting go, just gritting his teeth and telling Gyubin Yang, "Everything you're doing now is just throwing a tantrum, acting childish." Hearing these words, Gyubin Yang's heart also trembled. During this conversation, the rope trapped in the bridge pier suddenly snapped. Gyubin Yang immediately fell into the sea with the broken rope. Falling into the sea, Gyubin Yang's life flashed before his eyes in an instant. Feeling his life about to end, he peacefully closed his eyes. But suddenly, the sound of someone entering the water made Gyubin Yang open his eyes again. It turned out Insu Nam had also jumped into the sea. Minutes later, both men lay exhausted on the beach. Insu Nam was the first to speak, asking about Gyubin Yang's condition. When the rescued Gyubin Yang heard Insu Nam's call, he was about to lift his head to recover, when he saw the bloodied Insu Nam collapse. Standing behind him was his own family member, Donghua Li, holding a baseball bat slowly dripping with crimson blood. Shocked by Donghua Li's betrayal, Gyubin Yang couldn't accept this reality, and was still making excuses for Donghua Li. However, under the temptation of money, Donghua Li and the thugs had long lost their humanity. Suddenly, Donghua Li swung the bat, and Gyubin Yang was immediately splattered with blood and knocked unconscious. On the other side, the tattooed girl who received the news was frantically reporting to Sang Lim about Donghua Li's collusion with Geo Park. But Sang Lim, understanding the situation, remained unusually calm, because she knew that, for their respective interests, this struggle had reached a stage where enemies and allies were indistinguishable, like fish in a tank that can devour each other when hungry. At this moment, Geo Park, having achieved his first victory, was particularly happy, and wanted to drink more with Donghua Li. However, Donghua Li seemed more interested in defeating Hanjun Park. Actually, Geo Park had long been prepared to defeat Hanjun Park. He knew that without Junwoo's financial support, Hanjun Park was just an ordinary thug. So to defeat Hanjun Park, he had to first destroy Junwoo. In Geo Park's eyes, Junwoo's current wealth was a joke, not to mention he had extensive connections. Within days, Junwoo's company was deep in debt crisis. All companies that had cooperated with him terminated their purchase orders, and all financial institutions and banks in the market stopped lending to him. Faced with daily financial expenses of hundreds of millions, Junwoo was extremely frustrated. Due to a momentary oversight, he had failed to defend against this, leading to today's predicament. Just then, Sang Lim came before Junwoo with a tattooed girl, bringing him a large amount of funds. The scene shifts to the next day. Whether it was media overhype or excessive dramatization, the chaebols of K-Country all seemed to be perverts. Looking at the video of himself abusing a female actress, Geo Park was furious. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. The opponent's computer contained many more perverted videos that hadn't been released. The person holding this evidence was none other than Sang Lim, also a fourth-generation heir of Seongsan Group. When receiving Sang Lim's call, Geo Park cursed at her. But he could only agree to her request for a meeting, because once the videos were made public, he would lose all his glory. Soon, Geo Park arrived at the location Sang Lim had arranged. Seeing Sang Lim, Geo Park wanted to explode. But being constrained by her possession of his inappropriate videos, he could only offer verbal threats. Unfortunately, he had miscalculated. With Junwoo's appearance, Geo Park realized the complexity of the situation. However, things weren't as he thought. Junwoo's appearance wasn't to declare his collusion with Sang Lim, but to make things simpler. Simple enough to end the scheming between the three through a single battle, preventing those who wanted to reap the benefits from succeeding. With Geo Park's tacit agreement, a great battle was about to be held at Jamsil Baseball Stadium. However, regarding Junwoo's decision, Sang Lim had no confidence in victory, because she knew Geo Park agreed because he had substantial power. Once Junwoo was defeated, he would lose everything. But Junwoo was full of confidence at this moment, because he knew that as long as the opponents weren't all freaks like Cheonsu Kim, no matter how many thousands of troops they had, Hanjun Park would cut through them like vegetables. Just then, sudden hurried footsteps were heard, and Seon Choi burst through the door in panic. Seeing everyone, he shouted that Hanjun Park had disappeared. At this moment, Junwoo was worried about Hanjun Park's disappearance. As his strongest fighter, Hanjun Park would be the key to victory in the Jamsil battle 3 days later. Recalling his last conversation with Hanjun Park, it all seemed to have been foreshadowed. With the current situation plus the still injured Insu Nam, Junwoo began to doubt his confidence in victory. Just then, Dong-Yeon Kim stepped forward and declared that they would definitely win this battle. Faced with Junwoo's doubts, Dong-Yeon Kim and Seohyun Choi brought another general, Jung-Yeon Cheon, stimulated by Dong-Yeon Kim. Junwoo also stated that within 3 days he would definitely bring Hanjun Park back. On the other side, the track and field team, that had been supported by Geo Park, were eager to prove they weren't freeloaders. Meanwhile, Donghwa Lee's thugs were also enthusiastically volunteering under his provocation. Time quickly came to the day of the decisive battle. Led by Geo Park, the thugs carrying knives, guns, and clubs marched into the stadium in great numbers. The sheer number amazed the watching Seohyun Choi and Sang Lim. In contrast, Dong-Yeon Kim's side had only a few people. But having just completed Muay Thai training, Dong-Yeon Kim was full of confidence. Moreover, with senior brother Jung-Yeon Chon by his side, this battle was a perfect training opportunity for them. However, seeing this huge disparity in numbers still made Seohyun Choi and Sang Lim worry. Only Hanjun Park's return could put everyone at ease. At this moment, after traveling through mountains and rivers, Junwoo finally saw Hanjun Park in a deep mountain. Seeing the shock that Hanjun Park brought, Junwoo's heart was filled with both surprise and joy. Back to the battlefield, without Hanjun Park, Dong-Yeon Kim and Jung-Yeon Cheon still made a beautiful opening. This made the watching Sang Lim sincerely praise the strength of Junwoo's team. But in the eyes of the also watching Seohyun Choi, the current advantage was just an illusion. The opponent's ace hadn't appeared yet, everything was unknown. Sure enough, just as Dong-Yeon Kim was fighting left and right, immersed in his new fighting technique, a tricky punch suddenly shot straight at his face. Fortunately, Dong-Yeon Kim reacted quickly and blocked it. But the powerful force hitting his arm still made him apprehensive. When everyone saw clearly, the puncher was actually Donghwa Lee, Gyubin Yang's former follower. It turned out that all along, Donghwa Lee had the same strength as Gyubin Yang. But to conceal his identity and reduce trouble, he had hidden behind the scenes. In reality, this person was ruthless and extremely vicious. From his use of Gyubin Yang's guilt toward him to deal with Junwoo's team, one could see this person's despicable and shameless behavior. After blocking Donghwa Lee's strike, Dong-Yeon Kim reacted and quickly launched a counterattack. However, unexpectedly, Donghwa Lee actually pulled a nearby accomplice to use as a human shield. Such despicable behavior truly disgusted Dong-Yeon Kim. But just as Dong Hyun Kim kicked the thug, Dong Hwa Lee's fist had already smashed into Dong Hyun Kim's face. As both withdrew their moves, Dong Hyun Kim's eye corner immediately bled. Looking at Dong Hwa Lee's side, the hand that had hit Dong Hyun Kim was slowly dripping blood. It turned out Dong Hwa Lee had a finger blade hidden in his hand. As large amounts of blood blurred Dong Hyun Kim's vision, Dong Hyun Kim, who could normally take on 10 opponents, was immediately controlled by the surrounding thugs. On the other side, facing such a large number of thugs alone, Jung Hyun also began retreating steadily, unable to take care of himself. Seeing this situation was decided, Dong Hwa Lee prepared to finish off Dong Hyun Kim, amid his own curses. Just then, sudden cries of anguish came from the crowd. In the corner, thugs lying on the ground one by one showed expressions of terror, and where their eyes looked, a man was slowly walking in. But there's always someone stronger than the strong. With Dong Hwa Lee's loud shout, "Kill him!" the awakened thugs reluctantly charged forward. However, all Hanjun Park could think about was how to use new skills taught by his father. Hanjun Park hadn't learned it very well initially. Facing the charging thugs, Hanjun Park wanted to practice using new skills. But before new skills were used, one punch sent two people flying. Because of the strength gap, the watching athletics man immediately joined the battle. After blocking his flying kick, Hanjun Park continued using new skills, wanting to punch back. But unfortunately, due to being too slow, athletics man directly dodged. At the same time, shot put man slapped Hanjun Park's face, and immediately Hanjun Park was pushed flying like a shot put. In the direction Hanjun Park flew, Javelin Man had been waiting. Javelin Man raised his hand for another slap, also hitting Hanjun Park's face. The force was so great that Hanjun Park immediately bled. But this level of damage couldn't do anything to Hanjun Park, though it did arouse his admiration for the three's strength. However, conversely, these athletes sneered at Hanjun Park, compared to them, who trained daily. This legendary beast Hanjun Park was nothing special, or rather, not worth mentioning. Hearing these mocking words, Hanjun Park always responded with his fists. So he raised his hand and threw another punch. But wanting to use new skills in actual combat wasn't that simple. This punch only brought back an even stronger counterattack from Athletics Man. Seeing that in 2 exchanges, Hanjun Park's performance wasn't impressive. The relaxed Athletics Man wanted to end the fight with 1 punch. At this moment, Hanjun Park also seized the opportunity, and after a brief power accumulation, he threw a full-force punch that finally landed hard on Athletics Man's face. However, Athletics Man, who took this punch, wasn't severely damaged. So in shame and anger, he immediately retaliated with even greater force. Just as Hanjun Park had gained a slight advantage, he was defeated again in an instant. This made the watching Sang Lim and Soyeon Choi's emotions go up and down, feeling extremely anxious. Similarly, Hanjun Park, who had been getting beaten, couldn't stand it anymore. So at this moment, he decided to abandon new skills training and return to his savage fighting mode. Coming to Athletics Man's story. In K-country, track and field as a sport was never favored. But there were always some people with passion who wanted to develop and pass on this sport. However, the poor training conditions kept these athletes from making significant improvements. But at this time, Geo Park appeared with his capital, giving Athletics Man hope for his championship dreams. But as an exchange condition, Athletics Man had to help him with some shady dealings. But as Athletics Man's training conditions improved, his performance remained stagnant. He wasn't surprised by this because deep down he knew clearly that something called talent seemed to be what he lacked. Now, he seemed to see what talent meant in the man before him. Just 1 punch of Hanjun Park landed precisely on Athletics Man's face. However, Athletics Man, who trained daily, was no rookie. Steadying himself, he immediately delivered a flying knee to Hanjun Park's face. Without giving Hanjun Park time to react, the thugs immediately pounced and controlled Hanjun Park. Seeing Hanjun Park unable to move, Athletics Man immediately locked Hanjun Park's head with both hands and delivered an uppercut straight to Hanjun Park's chin. Accompanied by Soyeon Choi's scream from the stands, Hanjun Park flew out instantly. However, the so-called monster Hanjun Park used his core strength to steady himself. Seeing this, Athletics Man had to acknowledge Hanjun Park's natural talent. However, the battle wasn't over. It was unclear who would win. As they spoke, Athletics Man threw another punch. This punch was so fast that Hanjun Park had no time to react. But Hanjun Park's toughness was no joke. He gritted his teeth and delivered a headbutt straight to Athletics Man's face. With Athletics Man's glazed eyes, Hanjun Park raised his right elbow high, and with a fighting sound, Athletics Man was directly knocked to the ground. Seeing his boss fall, Shot Put Man charged forward with raised palm. Hanjun Park had no time to waste on him and directly threw a punch. The moment palm met fist, Shot Put Man immediately felt a powerful force drilling into his arm. Then this force penetrated his entire arm, and finally hit his face hard. The fear brought by this force instantly made Shot Put Man lose his fighting spirit. He was afraid Hanjun Park would end his athletic career. Seeing his trained athletes defeated one by one, The watching Geo Park couldn't stand it and began cursing. Hearing their financial backers' foul language, the athletes immediately became concerned. Thinking that continuing like this would endanger their livelihoods, they forced themselves to regain spirit and charged at Hanjun Park again. However, these athletes who had lost their fighting spirit were no match for the beastly Hanjun Park. It was just like cutting vegetables. They all competed to lie at Hanjun Park's feet. The stubborn athletics man wanted to persist to the end, but still couldn't escape being defeated. But the moment he lay down, he felt incredibly relaxed. The relaxation of no longer being exploited by his boss. However, Boss Geo Park wasn't having it. He went up and kicked athletics man, cursing continuously. For him, these athletes lying on the ground meant all the money he'd spent over the years was wasted. He couldn't tolerate it, and the angrier he got, the more he intensified his attacks. But Geo Park didn't expect his actions had angered the blood-crazed Hanjun Park. Suddenly kicked away, Geo Park hadn't reacted yet. When Hanjun Park's fist smashed into his face, knocked away again, he tried to use his background and connections to threaten Hanjun Park to stop. But this only further enraged Hanjun Park. So under Hanjun Park's iron fists, Geo Park was beaten until he crawled to the equipment room. A baseball was forcibly stuffed into Geo Park's mouth. At this moment, he desperately begged for mercy to no avail, and was finally beaten beyond recognition, and dragged back to the field like a dead pig. On the other side, Donghua Li, fighting Donghyun Kim, seeing the tide had turned with no chance of victory, chose to kneel and surrender, hoping to get beaten less. However, what Donghyun Kim hated most was this kind of treacherous person who betrayed brothers. So amid muffled groans, Donghua Li continued getting beaten. Finally, this Jamsil battle ended with Geo Park's team annihilation, as declared by Junu Oh. Geo Park, out. Not long after, Donghua Li, the fourth-generation eldest heir sitting in Seongsan Group headquarters, had already received the news. However, this outcome was already within his expectations. Seongsan Group's predecessor was the country's largest Yakuza violence organization. During K-country's era of rapid economic development, Seongsan Group seized this opportunity to grow into an existence that could influence politics, economy, and all aspects of society. But with the progress and development of the times, Seongsan Group gradually realized the impact of its negative image on society. So, through years of accumulation, it quickly whitewashed itself into one of the country's largest chaebol groups. However, Seongsan Group, originating from gangster violence, hadn't abandoned its old business. It had been secretly cultivating a large number of elite gangsters behind the scenes. As the eldest son of Seongsan Group, Donghua Li should rightfully inherit everything from the family. But succession in Seongsan Group has always been based on ability. Naturally, Donghua Li's younger brother Lion Kim became his greatest competitor. As for the money-throwing Sang Lim and Geo Park, who's hard to tell if he's a thug or an athlete, Donghua Li doesn't even consider them threats. Now that Lion Kim has lost Nexus, he seems less concerning on the surface. But Donghua Li still harbors doubts. He knows well that beneath seemingly calm lake surfaces, there are usually undercurrents flowing. Sure enough, just moments ago, upon learning of Geo Park's defeat, Lion Kim immediately sought out Cheonsu Kim and ordered him to implement the plan to reorganize Nexus immediately. Meanwhile, Sang Lim, who just joined Junuo's team, was met with mockery and ridicule from So Yeon Choi. But after Sang Lim demonstrated her financial power, So Yeon Choi, who had been skeptical, immediately switched sides and became Sang Lim's first bootlicker. As for Junuo, to him, Sang Lim not only provides financial support, more importantly, through her he can gain deeper understanding of Seongsan Group. At the same time, Cheonsu Kim, who had arrived at the former Nexus territory, suddenly found himself surrounded by numerous gang members, and they were precisely the gang elites secretly cultivated by Seongsan Group. Then a new character appeared, a man whose head had been split open by a baseball bat. Despite blood gushing out, the man didn't dare make a sound, because the one who struck him was his patron, Donghua Li. It turns out that Byung-go Choi, the top-ranking gang elite of Seongsan Group, had actually made a rookie mistake with Cheonsu Kim. At that time, Byung-go Choi had received two troublesome tasks simultaneously. One was a bar that had been attacked by a rival gang. The other was news about Cheonsu Kim, whom they'd been hunting. With the intention of training newcomers and testing young members, he assigned experienced elites to the bar, while sending some rookies to deal with Cheonsu Kim. As expected, facing the once nationally dominant Cheonsu Kim, these overconfident rookies were no match for him, although they had undergone rigorous selection and hellish training since childhood. That could only determine their floor, not their ceiling, because they were facing a fighting genius with no ceiling. Moreover, Moon-gil Lee's sudden involvement made Cheonsu Kim even more formidable. In the end, the elites sent by Byung-ho Choi were completely wiped out. Learning this news, Donghua Li immediately flew into a rage and called Byung-ho Choi right away. But Byung-ho Choi, who had just perfectly handled the bar incident, didn't get a chance to make amends. After returning to Seongsan Group headquarters, the scene we witnessed earlier unfolded. Meanwhile, seeing Moon-gil Lee, Cheonsu Kim, pleaded with Moon-gil Lee to help him rebuild the Nexus organization. However, facing someone who had once abandoned the organization and forsaken his comrades, how could Moon-gil Lee easily agree? But unexpectedly, the usually proud Cheon-soo Kim actually knelt before Moon-gil Lee and begged Moon-gil Lee to forgive his past actions. However, such behavior only made Moon-gil Lee despise him more. The two parted on bad terms. On his way back, Jin-soo Kim was attacked again, only after knocking the weapon from his attacker's hand. Did Cheon-soo Kim see clearly who was attacking him? It was his former subordinate Baekhyun Choi. Due to Cheon-soo Kim's selfishness, the moment he disbanded Nexus, Baekhyun Choi had already broken away from him. Since then, he had been waiting for a chance to get revenge. Meeting face-to-face today, Baekhyun Choi naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. However, looking at his former comrade, and thinking of Moon-gil Lee's attitude toward him, Cheon-soo Kim fully realized that he had been nothing but scum. So Cheon-soo Kim picked up the knife from the ground and placed it back in Baekhyun Choi's hand. Next, he would give up any resistance and let Baekhyun Choi do as he pleased. This desperate ploy did soften Baekhyun Choi's heart momentarily, but the accumulated disappointment and pain in his heart remained as cold as the knife in his hand. Killing intent arose again, and Baekhyun Choi hesitated no more. He raised his hand and thrust the knife straight at Cheon-soo Kim's face. In this life-or-death moment, Cheon-soo Kim remained motionless, just as the blade was about to strike vital points. In a split second, Baekhyun Choi hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, the blade only grazed Cheon-soo Kim's cheek. Seeing the blood flowing down Cheon-soo Kim's face, Baekhyun Choi realized he simply couldn't deliver the killing blow to cover his weakness. With a string of curses, Baekhyun Choi ultimately chose to flee. The scene shifts, having learned from the last Jamsil battle. Both Hanjun Park and Donghyun Kim were intensively training their fighting skills, so that when the next battle begins, they wouldn't burden each other. However, during this time, their every move was being secretly monitored, and Cheon-soo Kim was also under surveillance, after experiencing cold treatment from one former subordinate after another. Cheon-soo Kim finally realized that wanting to restore Nexus's glory was nothing but a pipe dream for him now. Lion Kim, as the initiator, understood this very well, but without Nexus's support, with their current strength, they couldn't possibly contend with Dong-go Lee. But for Cheon-soo Kim, who had experienced betrayal by all, even if he was now alone, he would still brave the Dragon's Den, because this was his only chance at redemption. Meanwhile, due to their victory in the Jamsil battle, Sang Lim proposed they should press their advantage now and quickly take down both Cheon-soo Kim and Dong-go Lee. However, Junwoo had no intention of doing so. He knew well that the three factions were now balanced. Any conflict between two sides would give the third an opportunity. For now, waiting and watching was the best choice. Just then, Sang Lim suddenly received a phone call. It turned out Cheon-soo Kim had single-handedly infiltrated Dong-go Lee's headquarters. This sudden variable surprised Junwoo. But in just an instant, he understood. Behind this must be Nexus's failure to reorganize. And Cheon-soo Kim could only go all in. Now it was up to Junwoo to decide which side to kick while they're down. Sure enough, at Junwoo's command, So-yeon Choi began gathering troops. Single-handedly, Cheon-soo Kim had broken into Dong-go Lee's headquarters. Such a reckless move truly surprised Dong-go Lee. In his view, in such a short time, Cheon-soo Kim couldn't possibly rally all of Nexus's personnel. When his subordinates reported again that Cheon-soo Kim had indeed come alone, this meant Cheon-soo Kim was essentially flying into the flame like a moth. Hearing this news, Dong-go Lee immediately became excited, because for him, defeating Cheon-soo Kim meant Lion Kim was finished and there would be no more threats to his inheritance. Learning this news, Byung-woo Choi was even more eager to fight, vowing to use Cheon-soo Kim to wash away his previous shame. However, Cheon-soo Kim had now cast aside all burdens. Going all in, he was determined to use this opportunity to make up for the mistakes he had made. As more and more people fell to Cheon-soo Kim's iron fists, his stamina began to decline significantly. But the opponents rushing at him were getting stronger. Obviously, they were using human wave tactics to exhaust his strength. Actually, Cheon-soo Kim had already seen through their strategy, but he had already prepared himself for death. As time passed, Cheon-soo Kim's stamina was becoming increasingly depleted. After all, 2 fists can't fight 4 hands, let alone hundreds of hands here. Just as Cheon-soo Kim was outnumbered and about to be defeated, suddenly a charging thug was kicked in the chest by someone and immediately sent flying. Such tremendous force amazed everyone. And the one who kicked was Moon-gil Lee, Cheon-soo Kim's former comrade. And behind him stood all of Nexus's elite to get these people to assemble so quickly. Lion Kim, the mastermind, paid the price of asking for help for the first time in his life. Of course, for Nexus members, they still had unshakable trust in Cheon-soo Kim. This trust was based on their firm belief that Cheon-soo Kim was still the nation's #1 fighting genius. And for Cheon-soo Kim, what he needed to do next was prove with his strength that he was still the undefeated legend. With Nexus elites joining the fight, Dong-go Lee's thugs began falling one by one, and Cheonsu Kim faced his final showdown with Byung-ho Choi. Byung-ho Choi struck first with lightning speed. His punching speed was so fast that Cheonsu Kim couldn't help but marvel. However, such speed still couldn't escape Cheonsu Kim's perception. The moment their fists crossed, Byung-ho Choi's punch missed, while Cheonsu Kim's fist landed squarely on Byung-ho Choi's face. But Byung-ho Choi acted as if nothing happened, turning his missed punch into multiple strikes. Seeing this, Cheonsu Kim quickly raised his hands to block. At the same time, seizing the opportunity, Cheonsu Kim ducked low and threw a punch straight at Byung-ho Choi's abdomen. Without giving him a chance to react, he followed up with an uppercut to the chin. Byung-ho Choi, who had been taking hits, began to admire that under such physical exhaustion he could still launch such fierce attacks. The rumors of Cheonsu Kim's national dominance seemed to be true. But Byung-ho Choi's position as Seongsan Group's top fighter wasn't given for nothing. He charged straight into Cheonsu Kim's attacks. Such fighting style caught Cheonsu Kim off guard. He could only raise his hands to defend. But Byung-ho Choi, having closed the distance, didn't continue his rampage. Instead, one hand grabbed Cheonsu Kim's wrist, while the other quickly pressed against his shoulder. Then, with a beautiful grappling move, he instantly pinned Cheonsu Kim to the ground, while continuing his verbal assault. In his view, such tricks from Cheonsu Kim could never cause any real trouble. But Byung-ho Choi really underestimated Cheonsu Kim this time. Just as he was about to brutalize Cheonsu Kim, in a moment of carelessness, his wrist was suddenly grabbed by Cheonsu Kim. Then he was taken down by Cheonsu Kim's low sweep. The rising Cheonsu Kim then stomped on Byung-ho Choi's face. From this moment on, Cheonsu Kim had completely figured out Byung-ho Choi's fighting patterns. Since his battle with Hanjun Park, that was the second time Cheonsu Kim felt fear. But the last time he faced similar fear was during his childhood, when street dogs charged at him. Fear made him instantly burst with the ability to foresee the future. And from that day on, whether fighting or gaming became easy for him, until he met Hanjun Park. Fear once again drove him to face the beast. Gradually, in his confrontation with the beast, he discovered more of his hidden abilities. Just like now, he could completely predict all of Byung-ho Choi's upcoming moves. And through his eyes, breathing, heartbeat, he could sense every muscle movement on Byung-ho Choi's body and counterattack the instant before his attacks. So in this battle, Cheonsu Kim was determined to win. However, even knowing of Cheonsu Kim's invincible ability, the consistently passive Byung-ho Choi wouldn't admit defeat, because in his dictionary, there were only two words: life and death, absolutely no third option. So today's duel wouldn't determine winner or loser, only life or death. Seeing this, Cheonsu Kim no longer held back, determined to send off this stubborn man. But he seemed to be wrong, for Byung-ho Choi, who had experienced countless life and death situations, he knew well that stamina was the key to survival. And Cheonsu Kim's stamina had long been exhausted, so the final outcome of this battle was still unknown. Then, Byung-ho Choi finally caught an opportunity. Cheonsu Kim, forced back against the wall, seemingly had nowhere to retreat. Byung-ho Choi seized the moment and threw a full-force punch. However, Cheonsu Kim used the strong rebound force behind him to leap high into the air, then turned and stomped on Byung-ho Choi's back of the head. This kick was tremendously powerful, instantly shocking all the spectators, especially Byung-ho Choi's patron, Dong-go Lee. Watching the retreating Byung-ho Choi, Dong-go Lee couldn't help but burst into curses, while reminding Byung-ho Choi of his identity as Seongsan's loyal dog. With a death-defying resolve, Byung-ho Choi never slacked off during the fight. After enduring another round of one-sided crushing by Cheonsu Kim, the determined man still raised his fists, ready to continue fighting Cheonsu Kim to the death. Just then, a hand suddenly rested on his shoulder and pulled him back. And the owner of that hand was actually Lion Kim. For Lion Kim at this moment, this fight had become meaningless. The final result would only be mutual destruction. However, Dong-go Lee on the side wasn't having it and burst into verbal abuse. But unexpectedly, Lion Kim suddenly reached out and slapped him across the face. This slap shocked everyone present, especially Dong-go Lee. He couldn't believe what had just happened. And next, Lion Kim made it clear that Byung-ho Choi wasn't Dong-go Lee's personal toy. He was Seongsan Group's property, and today he had the right to choose which future king to follow. It turned out Byung-ho Choi was never just Seongsan Group's loyal dog. He was the sword of the next king. If the day came when the time was right, he had the right to choose the strongest king as his master. And at this moment, Lion Kim played this trump card, while Dong-go Lee paid the price for his arrogance. He picked up the baseball bat again to strike Byung-ho Choi, and at this moment, Lion Kim showed an intriguing smile. Because Byung-ho Choi blocked Dong-go Lee's attack, he ultimately chose Lion Kim. Faced with such a result, Dong-go Lee couldn't accept it. And what he didn't know was that this was all their father's scheme. Because only the strong could become Seongsan's next king. After defeating his older brother, Lion Kim successfully became the heir to Seongsan Group, and also brought Seongsan's gang organization under his control. So with royal power concentrated in one person, he now only had Hanjun Park as his remaining formidable enemy. At this time, learning the news, Junwoo fell into deep thought. With Lion Kim's current strength, trying to defeat Nexus piece by piece had become a long and impossible task, and the best approach now was to use a blitzkrieg to quickly resolve everything. For this, Junwoo decided to bet everything he had. Soon, the meeting between the two men began with Junwoo's arrogant swagger, because he held criminal evidence against Seongsan Group. Junwoo wanted to use this as stakes, to bet on the final battle with Lion Kim. Unfortunately, in Lion Kim's eyes, this was all garbage. Seongsan Group had operated for years. Their network had penetrated every level of government. A little dirt couldn't harm him in the slightest. What Lion Kim truly wanted was everything Junwoo currently possessed, including his burned-down building. Having said this, Junwoo smoothly issued his challenge. In 3 days, Junwoo would go to OJ Building, where both sides would engage in their final decisive battle. This would also be the ultimate battle, where both sides bet everything. Soon, all OJ employees received text messages about the company undergoing a week of renovations. And at this time, Junwoo, who had returned to the company, recalling the past, his heart still couldn't find peace. Thinking about the battle Hanjun Park and the others would face, the only thing he could do next was handle the aftermath of the great battle. But learning all this, Sang-a-lim found Junwoo's gambling behavior both admirable and thrilling. This was perhaps why she chose to stay by Junwoo's side. Facing the approaching final battle, everyone had their reasons for participating. The recently discharged Insu Nam, because he had once helped Nexus commit wrongdoing. This time he would lead the Incheon brothers to make amends. Jongyeon Cheon at the convenience store, looking at Sohyun Choi so close by. For his goddess, he must use this battle to prove his determination. And the Gangseo League brothers outside, feeling Jongyeon Cheon's passionate emotions, they too would follow to the death. Dongyeon Kim at this time recalled those 2 years of leg disability. Humiliation had never left him, and this great battle would bring him a chance for self-redemption. Hanjun Park had also endured humiliation during those years. With vivid memories of the past, he naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. For them, everything began with Nexus, and everything would end with Nexus. At the same time, Cheonsu Kim finally waited for this opportunity. His dream of controlling everything and achieving freedom, he would once again prove he was forever #1. Actually, the rules of this great battle were simple. After representatives from both sides occupied the rooftop, the side that ultimately won in battle would be the victor. This time, both sides also put up everything they owned as stakes, and had it notarized by lawyers on site. So both sides held unwavering determination to win. Of course, Lion Kim's side had better odds with superior numbers. But Junwoo wouldn't be foolish enough to throw eggs at rocks. He chose OJ Building as the battlefield. First, in terms of terrain knowledge, Junwoo already had a natural geographical advantage. So, in tactical deployment, of the building's 2 elevators, one must be guaranteed to allow Hanjun Park and the others to ascend smoothly. And this task was entrusted to Incheon's Pork Cutlet and Gangseo League. But as the great battle began, they immediately faced their first formidable enemies, the former department heads of various Nexus branches. In just one encounter, Pork Cutlet was slapped several meters away by Ji-hyuk Kim, facing Nexus's elite forces. The huge power gap left Pork Cutlet unable to resist. But even so, it couldn't shake his determination to guard the elevator to the death. From childhood to adulthood, Pork Cutlet had always been a monster-like existence. Now his weight had increased to 273 kilograms. What increased wasn't just his massive body, but also his terrifying strength and powerful ability to take hits. However, Ji-hyuk Kim couldn't care less about any of this. To him, ants are just ants. Everything that Pork Cutlet is doing now is nothing more than a death struggle. At this moment, he just wants to teach Pork Cutlet how to be a proper person. But suddenly, the elevator behind him started ascending. In an instant, Ji-hyuk Kim understood what was happening. Hanjun Park and his group must have taken the emergency stairs to other floors and then taken the elevator. This means their interception mission has failed. At the same time, the Gangseo League, realizing what happened, had their morale greatly boosted. Because for them, the mission to guard the elevator has been completed. However, at this moment, Pork Cutlet suddenly exerted all his strength, tightly locking Ji-hyuk Kim with both hands, and loudly told the Gangseo League that they must continue to guard the elevator. Because once all of Lion Kim's people go up, there would be too many for Hanjun Park and his team upstairs to handle. Meanwhile, in another elevator, Cheonsu Kim had already brought the Seongsan gang and other Nexus elites to the 32nd floor. However, as the elevator doors slowly opened, the first person to greet them was Insu Nam from Incheon. Without a single word of nonsense, Insu Nam's eyes narrowed, clenched his fist, and charged toward Cheonsu Kim. However, the moment Insu Nam threw his punch, it was blocked by the sudden appearance of Moon-gil Lee. When two enemies meet, their eyes burn with hatred. However, their abilities have always been evenly matched, so naturally, their fight was also evenly balanced. This gave Cheonsu Kim the opportunity to continue ascending. Soon they came to the corner of the staircase. Cheonsu Kim saw two people who had been waiting for a long time, Dong Yun Kim and Jung Yeon Cheon. As the final barrier to the rooftop, the two encouraged each other, brimming with confidence. Just as Cheonsu Kim was about to make his move, Byung-Wo Choi suddenly stopped him. At this moment, Byung-Wo Choi clearly understood that Cheonsu Kim's real opponent was Hanjun Park on the rooftop. What he needed to do now was defeat the two men in front of him. Finally, Cheonsu Kim had no more obstacles, and successfully climbed to the rooftop, opening the door that would decide their fate. And the other man who could equally decide both their fates had already been waiting on the rooftop for a long time. Hanjun Park and Cheonsu Kim, these two men bound by destiny, finally faced their ultimate showdown. At this moment, due to excessive anticipation and excitement, Cheonsu Kim began trembling all over. Then he gradually fell into madness. 2 years of ups and downs had created inner demons within him. In his urgency, he now needed a chance to prove himself again. And defeating Hanjun Park today would be his final opportunity to realize his ambitions. Looking at the pathologically crazed Cheonsu Kim before him, Hanjun Park didn't have much to say. What he needed to do now was use his iron fist to give Cheonsu Kim a good cure for his illness. Then he instantly charged forward. The scene shifts to the 32nd floor. Just as the people downstairs were fighting fiercely, Hanjun Park upstairs was retreating step by step under Cheonsu Kim's assault. Such a disappointing battle performance immediately dampened the spirits of Cheonsu Kim, who had high expectations. It also made Junwoo, who was watching from the sidelines, start to worry. Maybe Cheonsu Kim's strength was too overwhelming. Maybe Hanjun Park's performance wasn't stable enough. But at this point, everything could only rest on Hanjun Park's new fighting technique. With Junwoo's hoarse reminder, Hanjun Park seemed to find some feeling. So when he fought Cheonsu Kim again, seizing the opportunity, Hanjun Park finally unleashed 10% of his new fighting technique's power. As this punch landed hard on Cheonsu Kim's face, Cheonsu Kim immediately felt his head buzzing. However, before he could react, Hanjun Park's second punch, with 20% power, hit his face again. This punch made Cheonsu Kim truly feel the power of Hanjun Park's fighting technique. But at the same time, he was secretly pleased that this level of power couldn't really hurt him, so he lifted his knee as a counterattack. However, this attack was met with a punch from Hanjun Park at 40% power. This punch was incredibly fierce, directly sending Cheonsu Kim flying several meters. Only then did Cheonsu Kim, spitting blood, become surprised by the formidable nature of Hanjun Park's fighting technique. However, when the next punch, Hanjun Park's 30% power punch, hit Cheonsu Kim again, Cheonsu Kim realized that Hanjun Park hadn't yet mastered this new fighting technique proficiently. But he still became wary of Hanjun Park's fists. Next, Cheonsu Kim would use his extraordinary ability to activate future prediction mode and seize the opportunity to deliver precise strikes against Hanjun Park. Gradually, Cheonsu Kim began to gain the upper hand again. He also began to scoff at Hanjun Park's clumsy fighting technique. However, this contempt only increased Hanjun Park's fighting spirit. With this, Hanjun Park even made a vow to take down Cheonsu Kim within 3 punches. Looking at the battered Hanjun Park, Cheonsu Kim only considered this wishful thinking. However, at that moment, Hanjun Park suddenly threw a punch. In an instant, the massive airflow generated by the punch blasted out several meters. This caused Cheonsu Kim's face to be immediately cut with a wound, blood flowing freely. By common logic, with the time Hanjun Park had spent training, he shouldn't be able to learn such a powerful fighting technique. But Hanjun Park's superhuman physique and talent still allowed him to glimpse the essence of the technique. Amazed by such extraordinary destructive power, and this being the only secret weapon in the final battle, he changed his previous fighting style to adapt to the technique. This explained his initial retreat. When the 80% power punch hit Cheonsu Kim's abdomen again, Cheonsu Kim shot out like an arrow from a bow, bouncing off the ground several times, and heavily crashing into the door behind him. The force of the impact directly smashed a huge crater in the fire door behind him. However, for Hanjun Park, Cheonsu Kim still had 2 more punches to take. The scene returns to the 32nd floor. As more and more thugs made it to the 32nd floor, Insunam, who had been able to contend with Moon-gil Lee, began to struggle in the battle, just as Insunam was about to be overwhelmed, dragging several unconscious thugs. Gyubin Yang actually arrived upstairs. Seeing this scene, Moon-gil Lee couldn't help but mock their ignorance, because so far, at least half of Nexus and the Seongsan gang members hadn't come up yet. This battle with such a disparity in strength was destined to end in Junwoo's defeat, and Insunam and Gyubin Yang would also pay the price for their so-called loyalty. Meanwhile, in the battle between Donghyun Kim and Byung-go Choi, Donghyun Kim didn't gain much advantage either, due to the innate physical difference. Even though Donghyun Kim was strong in combat, facing Byung-go Choi's massive frame, all Donghyun Kim could do was buy time. However, at this moment on the rooftop, Cheonsu Kim, who had just taken 2 punches, instead of dying, became even more excited, because this was the kind of decisive battle with Hanjun Park he had envisioned. But to cure Cheonsu Kim's madness, Hanjun Park expressed that his fists were the holy medicine. Unfortunately, with Cheonsu Kim's future prediction ability, every attack from Hanjun Park could be easily dodged by Cheonsu Kim. Just as Hanjun Park saw an opportunity and gathered 90% of his power to take down Cheonsu Kim with 1 punch, Cheonsu Kim's extraordinary ability once again helped him escape danger, dodging Hanjun Park's attack, and in the gap before Hanjun Park could withdraw his move, he slapped and pierced Hanjun Park's left eardrum. When Hanjun Park felt something was wrong, a wave of dizziness immediately hit his brain. It turns out that when a person suddenly loses hearing in one ear, it causes body imbalance in the short term, and the brain releases signals of dizziness. In the subsequent battle, this made Hanjun Park unable to make accurate judgments about attacks and defense. This also meant that from now on, the outcome was decided. At this moment, Cheonsu Kim naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity, and immediately began a merciless crushing assault on Hanjun Park. Seeing that Hanjun Park was about to be eliminated, Junoo could no longer remain calm. But at this moment, as a ringtone sounded, Soyeon Choi's call brought another battle report. The elevator on the first floor, guarded by Pork Cutlet and the Gangseo League, had fallen. All personnel were defeated. At the same time, on the 32nd floor, seeing more and more thugs pouring up, Insu Nam knew they could no longer resist. So he called Gyubin Yang, Jung Yeon Chan, who was still in fierce battle, and Donghyun Kim. The 4 quickly retreated to the fire exit on the 33rd floor, as the only passage to the rooftop. This would be their final line of defense, and the last chance to buy time for Hanjun Park. At this moment, a loud crash suddenly came from the rooftop door. The scene comes to the rooftop. Although Hanjun Park had been continuously crushed, he still clenched his fist, wanting to counterattack with 30% power. But how could this escape Cheonsu Kim's special ability? However, the next second, what hit Cheonsu Kim's face was Hanjun Park's forehead. This strike directly made Cheonsu Kim start questioning life. It turns out that Hanjun Park had also replayed their previous decisive battle, tens of thousands of times in his mind. He was already thoroughly familiar with Cheonsu Kim's attack methods and habits. During this time, Hanjun Park also awakened the same ability as Cheonsu Kim, predicting the opponent's next move. As for the dizziness caused by the earlier hearing loss, that was just something to endure briefly. So this 90% power punch from Hanjun Park could only be received by Cheonsu Kim's face. However, even after being blasted several meters away and spitting blood, Cheonsu Kim still withstood it all. But at this moment, he still felt like his internal organs were shattered. Thinking about Hanjun Park's equally half-disabled body, the scales of victory didn't seem to have tipped toward either side yet. And for Hanjun Park, now only the final punch remained. Meanwhile, Donghyun Kim and his team, who were stubbornly defending the fire door, were still making their last stand. But as more and more people surged up, they began to be overwhelmed, until Byung-go Choi also charged up. Facing that massive frame, they were powerless to resist. However, when they used their last strength to lock down Byung-go Choi, wanting to make one final attempt, the cunning Moon Gil Lee took the opportunity to rush past and open the fire door. Next, as everyone rushed onto the rooftop, they would witness the final and greatest moment of this decisive battle. At this time, Cheonsu Kim used his prediction ability again, but the scene he saw was actually him being repeatedly beaten by Hanjun Park. Cheonsu Kim was stunned, but then he showed a relieved smile. On Hanjun Park's side, he finally unleashed his full power strike, and this punch landed precisely on Cheonsu Kim's face. Then the massive airflow generated by the punch force directly penetrated through Cheonsu Kim's body. Amidst everyone's exclamations, Cheonsu Kim finally lay quietly on the ground, no longer able to continue fighting. Yes, Hanjun Park won. At this moment, everyone still couldn't believe what they were seeing, including Lion Kim. Facing everything he was about to lose, various calculations arose in his heart. However, seeing Hanjun Park's murderous gaze, fear immediately overshadowed all his previous thoughts. Fortunately, at this moment, Junoo rushed up in time to stop Hanjun Park, preventing Lion Kim from suffering physical harm. But Junoo still reiterated to Lion Kim the consequences of violating the bet. This forced Lion Kim to calculate the gains and losses, and finally swallow his anger through gritted teeth. This moment also marked the official end of the final battle. Junwoo would get everything from Lion Kim. At this time, Hanjun Park and Junwoo stood on the rooftop looking into the distance. Do you remember? That night when we first met? When I asked you to join me in revenge. Time passed so quickly. Time also passed so slowly. On this same night, we did it. Thank you, Hanjun Park. You did so much for me. You worked hard. Months later, Junwoo received all the assets transferred from Lion Kim as promised, so he immediately took out a portion to repay Sang-Lim. Sang-Lim was also very happy and relieved that she had chosen Junwoo. During this time, Chan-Soo Kim, who had been lying in the hospital for several months, after recovering, disappeared without a trace. The Nexus organization also began to fall apart during this period, gradually becoming something no one mentioned anymore. Thus, high schools across the nation returned to a peaceful atmosphere, and Junwoo, who had gotten his revenge, didn't gain much happiness. After all, the dead cannot be brought back to life. Perhaps the death of his friends and family would be an eternal pain in his heart. Fortunately, there's the healing medicine of time. Everything can be forgotten with it, but forgetting must start with erasing traces. So this house that carried Junwoo's memories would be completely demolished today. As for the others, Donghyun Kim returned to school. His day and night training had paid off. He would enter university as a sports scholarship student. Soyeon Choi also returned to school to study, although she extremely hated studying and liked to pursue excitement and a free lifestyle. Fortunately, she had a good teacher. Getting into a university didn't seem too difficult for her. As for her loyal fan Jongyeon Shion, this guy didn't inherit his father's business, but chose to start a venture in Southeast Asia with the Gangseo League's underlings. The venture project was growing his beloved mangoes. The scene comes to Insunam. During this time, he worked part-time while obtaining several skills certificates, and Yubin Young had also officially integrated into his family. In the future, they would work shoulder to shoulder for this family. As for our protagonist Hanjun Park, these past few months he was either sitting at home in a daze or standing in the gym in a daze. Finally, on this day, he figured it out. He found his father and firmly told him that he wanted to become a professional fighter. His father also smiled with relief. Finally, I have to mention Junwoo again. This scumbag, after achieving complete financial freedom, spent his days flying around the world traveling. During this time, he also won over the beauty Sang-Lim. I heard they even had a child together. Damn it, at the end of this manga commentary, this guy is the ultimate life winner. What a shame about my goddess. Okay, the end. Congratulations. Thanks everyone for watching.